presentation regarding the state of education and instruction right now, as well as a look forward to what some of the reopening plans will be for the fall. And so with that, I'd like to hand it over to the presentation prepared by our district partners. After that, I'd like to address some of the questions that were sent to me via email if they're not answered in the session. And then we will see about starting a discussion, but with the knowledge that we can continue discussion at a later date if we need to as well, because this is going to be necessarily nuanced, complex, and deserves a lot of consideration. But in order to even start that discussion, we need to hear what our partners are telling us now. And with that, I'll hand it over to our district partners.
So good evening, colleagues. I'm very pleased to provide this update to you this evening. This is the heart of our work, the teaching and learning process, and our staff has been working literally 24 hours, it feels like, but certainly 7 days a week sometimes, oftentimes, since we closed on March 18th. Some really leading edge work has been produced, and now we are executing it into the field at full throttle. So in about 10 slides, 4 presenters will share at a high level the progress that is being made and some of the challenges that still remain. First, we'll have several slides from the technology department to talk about the device distribution and internet access. Ann Botticelli and her team will talk about the guidance that has been given to teachers, how that guidance is faring, and the grading practices that will be implemented for what is in effect the 3rd and 4th quarter of this year. 3rd quarter will combine 4th quarter, and there'll be 1 3rd quarter that will count twice, and you'll hear about that. Also, Dr. Fatima Morel has been busy and keeping our young people engaged at the state level in various activities with the My Brother's Keeper initiative, and a lot of cultural infusion work into our curriculum, even though we're on shutdown period or closed at school. That work is all the work, as has all the work continued with gusto. So I'm very pleased about that. And of course, some of you have heard about the Pulitzer Prize that was won by the 1619 project head. She's fabulous, and I'll let Fatima say something about that. And then, of course, last but not least tonight, Dr. Tanja Williams and her incredible staff have focused on the social emotional wellness of our students and health of our students. We always focus on the whole child here in the Buffalo Public Schools. And so one without the other is not the full complement of our work. So you'll hear about all of that as well. And then we'll open it up to discussion. Certainly welcome, I think, colleagues, questions at the end of each section. So technology will be a couple of slides. Let Myra do those 3 slides and then ask questions. The instructional learning piece will be 3 slides. Let Ann do those 3 and then certainly ask questions. And then Tanja will have the last 3 slides and then open up for discussion after that. Does that seem fair?
That does. Yeah. Thank you, Cash.
Okay, Dr. Rivera, thank you very much. Myra, if you could lead off. And colleagues, do you have your slide deck in front of you? The slides?
I do. Yes,
okay,
I do.
Well. All right. So go ahead, Myra.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Cash. Good evening, and good evening, board members. I'm going to lead off with the device distribution updates. So since March 17th, over 7,500 devices have been provided to our students in grades 9 through 12. We've achieved about an 80% distribution rate for high school students through the efforts made since that time to ensure that all of our students have ample opportunities to pick up a device. We've developed a high school device pickup form that can be completed for the requesting parents or students by our associate superintendents, by our principals, and a help desk associate if they were to call into the 7100 line. In gathering that information, we have mailed letters, we've sent emails, we've made phone calls and sent text messages with the pickup information for those devices. And we have also engaged our ASLs and principals to assist us with identifying and reaching out to those students who still need a device and may not have picked them up from the information that we've been sending out to them. So through engaging with our ASLs and principals to assist with that outreach, we've learned that many students have chosen to not use a BPS assigned device for various reasons. And we've also been able to better pinpoint those who still need a device. For grades 3 through 8, as of April 23rd, which was the completion of our first round of distribution, 10,440 devices were handed out. We've made several distribution dates, which resulted in an additional 1,200 plus devices that were picked up for a total of 11,672 devices that were distributed for grades 3 through 8. And we still have one more makeup day this Friday. So as you can see, we're achieving an approximate 80% distribution rate for the 3 through 8 devices as well. And we do anticipate that number to further increase with the assistance of our principals who are volunteering to deliver those devices to student homes. On our next slide, about internet access, on April 4th, we had a mobile hotspot survey that was posted to our district website for our BPS family community to complete via mobile phone or a computer to request a device for internet access. Letters were mailed to the homes, and those letters had a QR code so that they could access the survey directly from a mobile phone. And if beyond that they needed further assistance, the requester could call the BPS helpline and someone could complete that survey on his or her behalf. To date, we have received approximately 900 unique responses, and what that means is we've removed duplicate requests and we've done a cross-check of siblings to ensure that we are only providing one hotspot per student household. And gathering the information via that request survey was essential because it provided us an opportunity to collect the most current contact information to ensure that requester was reachable when the hotspots were configured and ready to distribute. So we sent our first notification to our first group of students, which were high school AP students who were contacted to pick up devices last Wednesday. After last Wednesday, we sent notification to our second round, which consisted of remaining high school students from the survey, and they picked up today. And so far, we have about 76 devices that were picked up based on the notifications that we've sent out so far. Next week, we'll be sending out notifications to our 3 through 8 students for them to pick up devices next week as well. So we've also engaged with Charter Spectrum to increase transparency and opportunity for our student households to obtain free or reduced cost internet access. New subscribers can get a 60-day free internet access, but they must cancel prior to the 60 days in order not to roll into the normal billing cycle. On top of that, Dr. Cash has provided a statement letter that indicates the Buffalo Public Schools participates in the community eligibility provision of the National School Lunch Program that makes all of our students in the school system eligible for free and reduced lunch. So this helps with the qualifications that are needed for Spectrum's program that provides that reduced cost internet access. So the survey is still posted and we're still collecting requests, and we'll continue to make strides to reach out to our parent community and student community to ensure that we're providing them with internet access. On the next form, I'd like to talk a little bit about our student tracker form. This form has been designed to provide a way for teachers to capture information regarding student contact on a weekly basis. As you'll notice at the top of the form, there's a link to access documented instructions on how to complete the form. When they access the form, the user ID of the teacher is going to auto-populate in the username field so that the students that are assigned to the teacher's rosters can also populate down near the bottom of the field, and they're going to populate with a default indicator of contacted. So the teachers will select the grade or grades and the subject or subject areas that they teach. They're going to select their school from the drop-down field, and then he or she'll enter the week ending date, which is going to be the Friday of the previous week. The number of students I teach and the number of students contacted this week also auto-populates with a quantity based on the number of students that are in that teacher's roster. So for any students not contacted, in order to indicate that they have not been contacted, the teacher will deselect the contacted box. And in doing so, additional fields are going to appear where they enter information about the number of contact attempts, the contact method, and the end result of the attempted contact. And so that process repeats itself for each student that the teacher was not able to contact. And in doing that, the number of students contacted this week decreases based on every student that's selected as not contacted. And then once they finish that work, they click Submit Survey, and the survey is submitted and it's done. So that concludes the slides that I have related to technology.
Colleagues, do any of you have questions about technology, devices, distribution, access, anything?
I have questions.
Okay, you want to ask them at this time, or you want us to continue?
Ann, can I ask?
Yeah, so two things that I would like to suggest at this point. First of all, if you're not speaking, if you could mute your microphone, because we're getting a lot of feedback that's interfering. The second thing is, if we have multiple questions and we don't see you, you may need to identify yourself by name because the screen is minimized, or you could use the raised hand function. If you hover over your screen, there's a raised hand button. We can see you that way. So please go ahead and ask your question. I believe that was Sharon. Yes, that's a mountain comment. Excellently done. I saw your hand.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I have a couple of questions. The student contact survey, is it possible to expand that to cover how the children are doing, if we are reaching them as far as if the social emotional needs? Is there a possibility for the teachers to, ask, the children if they need food, or if they're warm or whatever? What I'm trying to get to is, and yesterday I attended the mental health and the health monthly meeting of the district, and one of the things that was brought up is that many children needs are not being addressed, and they have no one other than that the teacher has a rapport with them, and that they may share with the teacher if they are hungry or things like that. And then from there, we would give that information, I would hope, to the principal, and they would provide support for the children. That was a concern, a question that I had regarding the student contact survey, if it's covering the social emotional needs. That's my first question. The second question was a conversation, and maybe you're going to do this later, about our connectivity, our community connectivity grant, and what's being done with that, and what timeline are we on to complete that? Those are my two questions.
Well, Myra, I would like you to talk about the tracker, because I think it's not quite responsive to what Ms. Cotman is talking about. This is just gathering data and numerical kind of information. The issue of engagement and talking directly with students comes in another way through Dr. Williams' office and our work there. But Myra and any others, colleagues, if you want to jump into the question of how we are doing what's in effect a wellness check on our students.
So this is Tanya Williams, and included in my slides, I will address kind of what that progression looks like when we become informed that there are students that have needs, whether they are sheltering needs or food needs, that we do have a process in place to address those needs. So I could talk about it now, or if you'd like, I can talk about it when I get to that place in the slide.
Well, you can wait. We can wait. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd rather you wait, Tanya. But what I was trying to get at is Myra talking just about what information we glean from this tracker survey.
Right. So from the tracker survey, the output of the results will be exactly what number of students have been contacted and what number of students have not been contacted and which students have not been contacted. From the information in terms of the end result, we'll be able to gather if it's an invalid phone number, if we found that they have moved and we don't have record of that. So it gives us enough information so that we can take the next step in terms of how to close that gap of not contacting that student and contact the student. If we find that this form needs to have questions, I mean, we're flexible enough to accommodate it. This was just our first phase step or approach in terms of getting some level of data and information with regard to contact. And then we can go deeper based on the feedback that we get and the need that sort of results from this form in terms of how far we need to go in modifying it and expanding it in its functionality. But it is flexible enough in the development that if we needed to add fields or add the capability to capture more information, we can certainly do that.
Thank you very much. So I had a question from Mr. Petrucci. I also briefly have one from Dr. Evans-Brown and Ms. McCosey. If you're still interested in that, go ahead and click your raised hand and we'll go through. Mr. Petrucci, you're up.
Thank you very much, Vice President. First question I have is, so we're looking at about, prior to our third round of outreach, somewhere in the range of 2,500 devices that still need to be distributed. That's a little concerning to me. So
That's
after we do the third round and we do the outreach, who's going to do this final outreach? Do you have someone identified? Because it's going to be very personal, almost to the granular level of knocking on doors. If they're not answering phones, if they're not answering emails, I just want to know how we're doing the outreach. And the second thing, I'm just kind of curious if there's an overlap or an outreach between our hotspots and our devices. I want to make sure that people have both.
So Lou, let me answer the first question, and Myra, you answer the second. Myra indicated that this survey that we're getting about whether parents need internet service and whether they are going to receive our devices, in other words, take them, we're finding some interesting data. Quite a few families are not taking the computer, Lou. So if you put 11,000 over 14,000, that difference does not mean that all of those devices need to be distributed. There's good percentage less than that, because many families have said they don't need the device, they don't want to take the device, and so forth. So Myra, could you say a little bit more on that issue and then answer the question about the hotspot overlap?
Right. We have engaged the ASLs who have helped us engage the principals in terms of trying to pinpoint better those students or households that still need a device but have been unable to pick them up. Again, through the course of engaging principals at the high school level, and even some of the requests that we've gotten in and the principals have reached out, we found that some of those households just do not want the device. They have declined it. I spoke to a family or mother of a student just the other day who was having issues using her child's device, and we needed to try to troubleshoot their personal device. I offered her the BPS device, and she completely insisted that she'd rather use her own device. So, you know, there are lots of instances where they're just not using them. But we are, you know, trying to leverage the principals who are much closer to the family households to help us identify where that need still exists. At the elementary school level, principals are volunteering to take those devices to the homes of those students they absolutely know still need them, but they may not be able to come pick them up. And we are now offering the same opportunity for high school principals to make home deliveries to students or households that need those devices. With regard to the internet access, the purpose of the survey was so that those people that needed that could be intentional and purposeful about letting us know that they needed the internet access. And while it is a web-based form and it's kind of, you know, contradictory that you would ask them to take a survey that's internet-based, we tried to make it convenient so that they could take it via a cell phone, because, you know, most people have cell phone. We gave them a QR code. They can call the 7100 number, and if they're requesting an internet or hotspot, we can actually fill the form out for them on their behalf. Someone else can fill the form out for them on their behalf, because it is posted via the public-facing website or web page, and we are going to engage principals to help us with that outreach as well. Our approach was to try to make sure that we hit those people that have been intentional, again, about letting us know they need that internet access. And we've also socialized the information about the spectrum programs. So our hope is that some people are taking advantage of that. Some people actually have internet access, and some people are going to pick up those hotspots. And hopefully with all three of those things in play, collectively, we can more effectively bridge the digital divide.
Thank you. I'd be very curious to see how this all shakes out when you're finally done. My concern is just a child not having the service to participate fully and completely in the educational process.
Right. And we'll, you know, I mean, we're going to continue as long as we can, you know, with the devices that we have on hand, with any funding that's granted to us to help us with buying additional hotspots. So, you know, the service and the provision for as much as we have inventory to be able to do that will always be available to provide them with what they need when they request it, or, you know, or if the need is brought to our attention.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So what I'd like to do is ask one follow-up question, then I'm going to move to Dr. Evans-Brown, Ms. Mukosi, Mr. Hurd, and then Ms. Belton-Cotman with questions. The follow-up question just expands on the one that Mr. Petrucci just asked, which is that is there a way in which that we can use that survey form and the fact that students are not responsive to be able to do a reach out and see if perhaps they weren't either they weren't contacted or they didn't think they needed the technology and then changed their mind? Is there some sort of potential there?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of potential there with the hotspot request form and the information that we've gathered from that survey, and the same with the device pickup form, because you know, we're going based on the assumption that that is the most recent and current information that we've obtained, and that too is the information that we shared with the high school principals in terms of here's the list of people that have requested that have not picked up. So that's how we were able to get a lot of the information in terms of, you know, well, I just don't need it anymore, or whatever the reason may be that that device is no longer required for that student.
Thank you. Is there a way to use the student contact survey for that as well?
That information is being pulled directly from the student information system. So, you know, I mean, we could go deeper into the address and phone number information that is on the student record, and we could potentially crosswalk that with any information that we have from our surveys. For instance, if there's somebody on the survey list or lists, and then there's a student that's on the student tracker results is not contacted, we could absolutely crosswalk that information. And hopefully, if they are on one of the other two lists with current information, that could be a means of reaching out to them, you know, under the assumption that that is the most current information.
Mostly I was asking to make sure there was more than one avenue available to the district to contact students, you know, who may not be able to access a web-based form, whose situation may change. And what I'm hearing is the answer is yes, there is.
Yes.
There's multiple avenues. Thank you very much. So I will turn the next question over to Dr. Evans-Brown, if you still have one.
It would help if I unmute myself. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Happens all the time.
So I was really excited to see the tracker, the student contact tracker survey, because it is a gauge to find out who's been contacted and who has not been contacted. And like Ann, I think it's an instrument that could work in many ways. For example, I think I heard you say that you'll look at the next steps, how to fill the gaps. And so if we find the gaps early, since school is going to be closed, what do we do with that information? Who gets it? How do we reach out to those kids who have not been contacted at all within this last 5 to 6 weeks, for example? Because from my experience and from my staff experiences working for the Buffalo Urban League, we too have contact with these families. And you're absolutely right. Some of these families do not need the district's devices because they have their own, for example. So you hear all kinds of different stories, but you also hear that some of these families don't have the balance. They don't know how to homeschool, for example, you know, their children. And so they're not getting information from, well, seemingly, they're not getting contacted by, you know, teachers, for example. I had spoke to this one teacher recently who said she had 96 children. I asked her just arbitrarily, so out of the 96 children, how many are you servicing? And her statement was about 20%. That was pretty concerning. So I think this survey is a really good start. This tracker is a really good start, and we need to branch off and figure out how we can also use it in other avenues. That was a statement, I guess.
Thank you, Dr. Evans-Brown. If there's no responses to her statement, I'd like to move over to Ms. Makosa's question.
Yes, hi everyone. My question is, and I think we're all dancing around different ways to use this data, and Myra, I really appreciate the efforts because this is so key in trying to balance, you know, the gaps, as you said. But I'm looking for, you know, the specifics around not only who we're not contacting in the past few weeks, but then also by schools. If, you know, certain schools seem to have an enormous amount of folks that they cannot get in contact with, no matter what the issue is. I do appreciate, Lou, your statements around, you know, knocking on doors, whatever it takes. But when we get those large numbers and it starts standing out by schools, I'm wondering how we're going to use this moving forward to be able to allocate the right resources to these schools, knowing that, number one, not just graduation rates, but just all kinds of numbers are going to be off balance, right? And those are going to count against so many different funding sources that come into play. So I'm looking for how we're bringing this data in, but then how and what avenues not only we're using to make sure that these students are contacted, but that we're also garnering this as an opportunity to really gauge what we need moving forward.
Mhm. Thank you, Ms. McCarthy. I think your point is that while this is something that we have to work with, and we're working with educational contingency planning, there are also some opportunities for some more insight into where we can allocate more resources, where maybe we need more support. Would any of our district colleagues like to comment on that?
Well, yeah, this is a new experience. So we're gathering data every day. When we hear that there are families that we don't contact or haven't contacted, we need to know that. We need to know that. We need to know who they are. You know, when we're in school, we can take attendance. Attendance for some students is egregious. It's severe, chronic, and you know, we have 4 categories of attendance. So we know that there are students, even when school is in, that we don't get a good attendance rate and contact. So we're going to learn and see what the data show, and then that will help inform our summer school work. It'll help inform our reopening work and what we will have to do to try to bring students back up to level. But we're also learning some exciting other news during this time. We're finding that some students are actually thriving under this condition, and are finding that working alone, setting their own goals, and being able to move ahead at their pace without some of the distractions and the behavioral incidents that occur during regular school. There's 2 sides of this coin, and so we're taking all of that in. So that we can help teachers when they come back. I don't want teachers to have to spend the first 12 weeks of school just trying to get students back in track as far as managing and learning how to reorient towards school. So there's a lot of prep work and pre-work we'll be doing from now on. That's why we want to perfect this technology remote learning system. We want to perfect this student tracking system, and that will yield more and more data for us to begin to build plans for reopening and plans to help students catch up, but also help students go ahead. We don't necessarily have to be in a lockstep grade pattern when we come back. There's a lot of innovative ideas that we'll talk about later or at another time even, we're reimagining school altogether during this process. And it can be quite exciting, can help some students go much faster and go ahead quicker. And they don't have to get tied down, languishing, you know, behind in classrooms where other kids are struggling. So there's going to be a lot of new ideas that emerge during this process. But thank you for all of those questions. Anyone else on this section, because we want to move to the other sections as well.
I still have Mr. Hurd and Mr. Scott and Ms. Belton-Cottman for questions. Thank you, Dr. for talking about the opportunities as well. I look forward to that conversation. So I'd like to move to Mr. Hurd.
Yes, working with several youth groups, you know, I just think a lot of different personalities about the home instruction. I'm glad to see that we have over 2,200 hotspots that's available. One of my questions were, have we identified the families, the Pacific families who can afford the rate? So after 60 days, if they were to get shut off, if you know they exist in poverty or on that poverty level to where they can afford internet service after that point, what can we do for them if it's going to exceed over 2,242 hotspots? Will they still be in line? My concerns are those that may be left out in the future, or maybe for summer programs. Also, I talked to a couple of families who had children that were suspended during the time period. 2 of the families said that one child was formal, another child was suspended, and they haven't had access to the material, but I did give them the helpline number to help the system through that. But we have some kids that distance themselves also. They feel that they already, some feel that they already caught up, that they got enough to pass the class, and what kind of edification with the technology are we giving them to keep on, consistently learning. And the other thing is, Dr. Cassidy just talked about the lot grade pattern, going through that. Some of the kids said that they love the system. It's a lot better. Some of them had issues of bullying within their schools or in the buses or in their neighborhoods. And so this alleviates the bullying. They can learn on a level that they can, progress on without, having to go through, different types of emotional barriers. So, it has pros and cons to this thing, but my main concerns right now are those that have been left out, maybe that have been furloughed or suspended, and those families that maybe 60 days after receiving the internet service, where would they be if money's run out in the family and they can't afford internet service, or a hotspot may not be available?
So, Mr. Hurd, this is Kendra Williams. I can speak to the suspended students because we had a pretty extensive process on making sure that every attempt was made to reach every single student, especially those that were on a long-term suspension. And so Mr. Frisch's office contacted, I'm told, every single family that was currently on a long-term suspension to let them know that they were to receive the same services and supports that their non-suspended peers were receiving. In addition to that, I had him then send a listing to principals, even though I know principals knew who was suspended in their schools, but to send a listing to principals to ask the principals to then have their SST teams, because we know those are our most needy students. And even if they called, sometimes they might not follow up and do what needed to be done. So we had each principal that had students out on long-term suspensions have their SST teams, those certified counselors and social workers who could facilitate those kinds of conversations with families, to also make sure that those students received everything that they needed. Now, I just got a call this week on our 7100 number from a student who said that he had a short-term suspension, but that he had not received his laptop. And when I called the principal, she said, we just spoke to that student yesterday. Arrangements have already been made for that student to come out and to pick up the laptop from whatever the site was where he was told to go. So I know that we've done, quite a bit of work trying to make sure that there are students that are not falling into those kinds of gaps. So if you have any names of students that we can follow up on and you can share those, I certainly will follow up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Those students that maybe have dropped out of school that's interested in coming back, that's one of the ones I was referring to, interested in coming back to continue education. Is there an avenue for those students?
You broke up and I didn't hear the full question.
Well, the question was those students that have dropped out of school, but want to come back to school. Is there an avenue for education for those children also?
Those students would need to be re-enrolled into a BPS school in order for us to do that.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Also, parents, it depends on their age. If they're still before 22 years old, and depending on how far behind they are, we have some options for them, but it's not as many as we'd like.
I understand.
Colleagues, I just want to make a comment. I'm hearing two things that I want to respond to that you've asked. One is the internet access piece. If the 60 days runs out and they still can't afford to continue with, if they have to get back on as a paying customer, this is something that we could approach philanthropy about and business entities about, because we've had calls and people asking what can they do, and I'd like to see sort of a program that maybe incentivizes families to be able to get a long-term discount, substantial discount in their internet access. So let's work together and figure out a strategy to approach the business and philanthropic community to help with that. And
Thank you,
work
Dr.
side by side with Spectrum. I guess they're the provider in this region, and see what we can do. So that would be one response. The district can't afford right now to be adding costs to its budget when we have such a difficult road ahead determining what our budget is actually going to be, what our source of revenue is going to be. The other question was asked by Dr. Brown about one teacher, and my concern about that is the ASLs are on the line, and I'd like the ASLs to respond a little bit, because no school should have a really low, that low in one class reach out. They shouldn't, because we've been working and talking a lot how all of this drills down to the level of the school. The principal then drills down to his or her roster at his or her school, and then each teacher. And so if they're unable to reach or connect by this time, the principal gets involved, and his or her staff get involved and do reach out to their kids. Everybody should know their kids in their school by name and know whether or not they've made contact with them or not. So ASLs, could you say something about this only 20% of my kids I was able to reach? I think that's what I heard from Dr. Brown, 20 out of 96 or something like that. Could one of you step up and talk about how you're working with your principals and how they then have the responsibility of connecting with their families?
So I have Ms. Wright and Mr. Samato ready to go. Ms. Wright, did you want, or excuse me, Dr. Wright, would you like to start?
Hi, yes, I would. So before I get into details regarding the response to that question, I just have to take a moment to give kudos to our principals and our teachers who are in the field, really doing an exemplary job of navigating that space of polarity. One day they were in brick and mortar, and the very next day they were operating in a virtual reality. So I do know that that has created some dissonance in quite a few people. And I think that that's what we may be hearing from the one teacher. By and large, every single teacher has done an outstanding job reaching the vast majority of their students. I know this to be a fact because on a weekly basis, each of the ASLs meet with the principals, and the principals report out on their grade level meetings. And at the grade level meetings, they discuss how they are able to touch bases with students. Whenever there is a concern that a child is not being reached, I have to tell you, the teachers organize, the principal organized, and they have already made home visits. They have performed in a way that I could not have ever imagined. So putting themselves in personal risk, going to homes, knocking on doors, has been an afterthought for them. They put themselves in harm's way on a weekly basis to ensure that the needs of their children are being met. Now, there are always one or two teachers in a building that has their own personal struggles or challenges reaching out to the student population, but it makes me wonder if that was already an issue before we have this new virtual reality. So if a teacher had strong relationships while they were in brick and mortar, they have even stronger relationships now that we're operating in the virtual reality. If they had disconnected relationships, they're absolutely going to struggle. I'm not saying that that was that one teacher's issue, but I am saying there's a lot of validity to that statement. Now, if the teacher was having trouble, I would suggest that that teacher go to the principal, and the principals have rallied teams. So there can be situations wherein there's a teacher that was out on maternity leave. The principals have emailed Jamie. Jamie has allowed for principals to hire substitute teachers because they did not want that break in relationship, that break in connections. We worry so much about not being able to see our kids that the principals and the vast majority of the teachers do whatever it takes in order to maintain those connections. So I just want for people to rest assured that the teacher with the 20% contact rate, that is a severe anomaly. The vast majority of our principals and teachers know exactly where most of the children are. And for that small, very small percentage of the children that we have not been able to connect with, we're working with Tanja's office, we're working with IT, we're doing all sorts of innovative activities so that we can try to maintain connection or gain connection. But I don't want people to think that principals are being passive in this. They're not. The teachers are not being passive at all. They are going above and beyond to ensure that they are maintaining contact with their children that they worry so much about on a daily basis.
Thank you for that, Sandy. That's a great comment. Thank you.
Mr. Samato?
Tino?
Sure, thank you. And not to get too repetitive, but to piggyback off of my colleague, Dr. Wright, you know, since the beginning, and Dr. Cash has been very explicit with how we're leading the principals have been very explicit in leading the teachers. The number one priority has been engagement. So aside from grading and just progress, the first priority has continued to be engagement when it comes to this. Now, what we see is when we meet with our principals weekly, what they're getting excited about when it comes to the grading procedures as well as the tracker is that it gives them an avenue to be even more strategic with that tracking. So they've had team meetings weekly, as Cassandra has indicated, as Dr. Cash has indicated, and now it gives them that avenue to track week to week progress in many different forms. That student engagement from the assignments being completed to also how teachers have connected with students, anywhere from the assignments to phone calls to those visits that Cassandra was talking about. So all of these things that are implemented and continue to be implemented just continue to one up everybody's game in that level of engagement.
Thank you for that. Dr. Wright and Mr. Samato, I understand what you're saying about it being a small proportion. And I want to ask this question with a real recognition that everybody is struggling right now. That we have asked, I mean, this is really a serious crisis. I don't think that can be overstated. And we've asked our teachers and principals, our students and our staff, to our administrators to operate in a situation that's completely unprecedented. And I was wondering if you could say a little bit about the process that you have in place to support those members that might be struggling, not just the students, but also our teachers and our administrators.
Yeah, could we, I don't know, I think we're getting into a little different area from this technology. And I think we definitely can put that question right over here.
Perfect. I'm fine
but
with that.
that'll come up nicely as we move along.
Thank you.
Is that
No,
fair?
I think that's a good idea. That's totally fair. I'd like to give Mr. Scott a chance to ask his question, and then we can move on.
Okay.
So just a side comment first, Dr. Cash, you mentioned needing funding for continued internet service for our students. Maybe we could have the governor reach out to Bill Gates to help us fund internet service for some of our students. But my question, I had requested an update on our students being connected. And Myra, I commend you and your team for all the work that you've done in getting the devices out and getting our students connected. You've done tireless work to get this done. But we hired a provider to connect thousands of our students' HARP data in the fall. And it was to connect students that are in our most vulnerable communities, and that work stalled. And I'm not so much looking to dwell so much on how we got here, but I want to get an update on where we are now and where we're going with HARP data and getting this work accomplished so that all of our students are connected.
So Myra, you and I talked about that today at length this morning, because I wanted an update on when this was to begin. And I thought, if I recollect my recollection, we were somewhere around May 5th or 6th, we were supposed to begin this design phase. So could you give us an update on that process with HARP data?
Yes.
A brief comment that this is part of what Ms. Belton-Cotman asked as well. So thank you for the timeline.
Okay. So actually on May 4th, which was just this past Tuesday, the walkthroughs of the schools began. The purpose of those walkthroughs is to identify the data closets, where the racks and the wireless access points should be mounted, where the electrical should be laid, and just pathways to understand how we are going to install this framework for connectivity on the 8 selected school sites. So 3 of the schools were completed yesterday. 1 had to carry over to today. And then tomorrow they will do the other 4. HARP data should be looking at the community partner sites this week. And within a 1 to 2 month period of time, we should have a full-blown design. Now, it is our intent to identify which school site is most ready and which one we can fast track along with the corresponding community partner sites, because even if we get one school site up and running, the efficacy of that connectivity is going to be compromised because it is a mesh network and it is designed to work in partnership or collaboration with those community partner sites to hopefully promote the best connectivity to those communities. So the output of this design is to try to identify, one, what the overall framework or look is going to be in terms of the installation of the equipment on these schools, as well as what order we can do them to get the fastest bang for our buck. You know, which school is the most ready that we can kind of fast track so that we can realize some success in this space of work to our communities.
Excellent. So just so I can clarify something, did I hear you say 1 to 2 months we could be at full capacity, or no, I misheard that.
Right. In 1 to 2 months, we would have a full-blown design. Now, I'm going to try to push them along in terms of building out our design. And what that design is going to tell us is where we place the racks, where we place the wireless access points, which poles should they be using? Do we have the pathways available to lay the cabling and the electrical in order to build this out? Some schools may be more ready than other schools, and we have our facilities people, you know, tied at the hip with our IT team to make sure that we are identifying, you know, where these pieces of equipment should be installed so that we are not in a swirl or we're spinning our wheels in developing the design. So our hope is that the walkthrough will give us enough information that we can say, here's what this is going to look like, and let's start the work. Because the last thing you want to do is start the work without having a design that you're confident in, and then you have to do rework. And rework results in change orders. So, you know, we're trying to do the due diligence up front with the correct planning and design to make sure that we're solid when we begin the installation. So HARP data has communicated 2 months. My hope is that we can get it done, the design that is, faster than that, and we can fast track one of the schools that, again, is the most ready. But I won't have a full-blown picture of what that timeline looks like until the walkthroughs are completed and we know what the shape of the school is in terms of accommodating this work, if that makes sense.
Okay, so at what point do you expect potentially all of this work could be done?
Right now, the high-level timeline is about the end of this year, beginning of next year. But that is very fluid. It all depends on what the walkthroughs and the design tell us.
Okay, thank you, Myra.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Ms. Belton-Cotman?
Thank you. I wanted just to correct one thing. The contract for HARP data was not signed until January of this year. I have a meeting tomorrow, and I'm glad that the question was answered, because tomorrow I have a meeting with some of our community partners. I will bring up at that meeting the concern about the students being without internet support after the 60 days. And I will ask at that meeting to see if there are any partners that will help us in regards to that. Other than that, my question was answered, Vice President. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So colleagues, we're ready to go into instructional guidance. Darren? Darren?
Yes, yes.
Who's managing the slides?
That'd be Mike Lucci.
Okay, make sure Mike stops on the last slide of this portion of the presentation. So for example, it would have been good to stop on that last slide with the data tracker, student data tracker, so that everybody could absorb what that looks like while we're in that part of the conversation, okay? So stop on the...
He is in 807 City. He's upstairs in 807 City Hall. So anytime you want to say go back a slide or forward a slide or something like that, he's able to do that in City Hall.
Okay,
and I can just speak to it?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, board members, and you can let us know as well. So, Ann, you're up, and if you could move through your slides. Ann Botticelli and her team colleagues have done a fabulous job in a very short time, as Dr. Wright indicated, on something we never even imagined we'd be at this stage. So appreciate all the hard work of all of our staff. Just been fabulous. Ann.
I hope that everyone's had a chance.
I'm sorry, we lost you.
She's probably going to have to call in.
Well, sometimes it's just a matter of unmute. Maybe she's muted, or she needs to get closer to it.
Probably having the same problems I had earlier.
Well, that might be. Let me take a look and see. No, you're unmuted.
She's going to need to call in.
Log out and log back in.
Well, it's just a problem. Does Mike know? Mike, you know that there's a problem with Ann Botticelli, please? Can you assist her? Thank you.
If you would like, we could move ahead to another portion of the presentation while that gets worked out.
Sure.
What is the consensus of that?
Fatima, are you ready? Fatima?
Yes, I'm ready. Can I be heard?
Yes. I hear you fine. Thank you.
Can you hear Fatima, everybody?
I can.
All right. I recommend that we go to the slide that deals with culturally responsive curriculum.
There it is. No, it's right there now. Yep.
That's it. That's
Hello?
Yes.
Can anyone hear me?
Good evening. Good evening, esteemed board and colleagues, and Dr. Cash. Thanks for this opportunity to share how we're continuing the work in the Office of CLRI. This is an important enzyme, as Dr. Cash calls it, for our district. And we most certainly weren't going to stop this important critical work during this COVID pause. Additionally, as Dr. Cash mentioned earlier, this is a great opportunity for us to infuse culturally responsive curriculum, resources, and materials while students are at home. So we're looking at this as an opportunity to really get on board with the technological platform, as well as providing hard copy material to our students who may need, need it in hard copy. So it really is a great time to develop family literacy and concepts of
culturally responsive teaching around family, because we actually are all home together with family members in most cases. And so we saw this as a great opportunity to move this work forward and having a real strong focus around continuous engagement for our students. So one of the high level pieces that we are working on is the MBK fellows, and our scholars are continuously engaged. Meet with the fellows. We meet with them bi-weekly. Their mentors, which are provided by Say Yes, meet with them virtually, of course, weekly. And we have state meetings, and our fellows from the Buffalo Public Schools, from East High School as well as McKinley High School, were featured at a New York State Village meeting just a week and a half ago, I believe. And they spoke about how this pandemic has infected them as burgeoning young men in this time period, this historic time period. And there were about 400, little shy of 400 participants on that virtual call, including our chancellor, Betty Rosa, and our Commissioner Tahoe, and board member Regent Catherine Collins and Regent Young. So there were quite a few people on, and our young men really shined and really were engaged around how they're helping in their community, because a huge component for MBK Fellows is community service, and how this pandemic has impacted their ability to do community service, or if they're thinking about it differently. So really some high leverage work is going on, continuing with our MBK Fellows. And we just brought on 2 additional MBK Fellows, one from middle early college high school, and then another from international prep. So we're growing with these young men. They have mentors. They have a book study that they are reading called Mad Truth by Dr. Wyatt, and really talks about being a young man and growing up and learning how to navigate being just a young man in America. So it really is a great opportunity happening with them. And we have our meetings with them ongoing. Additionally, some of the curriculum that we are infusing currently, and we're having quite a bit of success with, just from feedback that I'm getting from some of the parents that are in contact with me around the Brownies books. And so what we have developed, we were able to look at some historical literature pieces based upon the work of Dr. Goldie Muhammad, which her work will be featured in our district all of next year during the 2020-2021 school year. But she pointed us to the work of the Brownies books, which were edited in the 1920s by W.E.B. Du Bois. And with these books, it really is about family literacy, and we're servicing pre-K to 12 with these stories, and we're rolling them out in each package. So we've rolled them out in package 2, and they'll be coming out again with another set, pre-K to 12, in package 3. And really, they're designed to really read as a family, but students, of course, can read them independently. And then there's critical analysis activities that get the kids and the family members to think about this time period and how it shaped thinking for Black Americans, but really how it shaped thinking for all Americans, because the books there are diverse authors with these books, Black people, indigenous authors, Native American, Latinx, white authors, and really raising awareness of how we all are connected as the human race. And I really like the stories, and I'm learning so much as well. And so I know this is a great piece for family members, just looking historically at literature within the African American community and how that helped to shape thinking around literacy for all of us. And of course, we continue with our New Jersey Amistad now that we really, that we're on this technological piece, that just became even more important. And also Mayan. So what we did as a office is we began to research what's on Mayan, what's on the platforms that we already use that are culturally responsive, that can be easily accessed by parents and our scholars. And with the Brownies books as well, we want things that parents can do. So we didn't make these huge, just, out of the box kinds of learning modules that would, that take a whole lot of engagement, but really just making things layman's term, plain language that parents can do with kids and is powerful and impactful in terms of critical analysis. Likewise, New Jersey Amistad and Mayan Resources, we're using books and materials where kids actually can see themselves. Such wonderful opportunities for our pre-K learners and our kindergarten learners to have books and materials where they see children who are Black and brown children, and they're reading that and they're at home with their parents, and they get to, have these books read to them, and they get to see these visuals where they're seeing themselves. It's just such a great opportunity. And the 1619 project, we have our first rollout with package number 1 on March 17th, and we'll have our next rollout will be in package number 3, and that will be at grades 7 through 12. And we're so happy, as Dr. Cash mentioned, that Nicole Hannah-Jones, the lead author and the lead voice for the 1619 project, just received a Pulitzer Prize for commentary on the 1619 project work. And in their recommendation, who do they mention as a district for having broad use of the 1619 project that was in consideration for her to receive that prize? None other than Buffalo
That's
Public
right.
Schools. I was very proud of that, very proud. So we're continuing with this third package rollout, looking at the literature and related resources from the Pulitzer Center, because they actually have their own body of work and lesson plans. But we're also working with Ann Botticelli and Tim Lent from New Visions, and we've also created a whole deck of lesson plans and modules that we'll be pushing out to our community with this next hard copy rollout, as well as everything will be online on our website and on Schoology, our Schoology platform. And we employed a few teachers outside of our department to begin reading with us. Dr. Goldie Muhammad's book, Cultivating Genius, which really talks about looking at the promise of children of color and looking at how they learn best. And this is going to be a book that we love it. It's a great read. It's a quick read. It gets right to the point around culturally, linguistically responsive best practices. It looks at historical literature and contemporary literature and how we engage our kids in the classrooms. And so we're really excited about this book study, and we look forward to rolling it out to everyone. And either this summer, we're still thinking, or this fall, but of course you all would be having a copy of that as well, board, and hoping you'll be reading along with us. And all of these things we've had time to really, really beef up our website. So when you get an opportunity, go and look there, and you'll see we're featuring our resources, literature, our book list, programs, what our programs are about, professional growth we've done, and what will be coming in the 2021 school year. So we've had some time to get that going, and then we want to make that very public for our parents and everyone else, and that's being continually updated. So again, this work is still ongoing. It will continue to grow in this new virtual reality, this new platform of life, and I just look forward to this opportunity for those students who actually are at home and are like saying, feed me more, feed me more. Oh yeah, and we have Global Scholars. We're now relaunching that platform as well. So that's what's going on. Thank you. Any questions?
Okay, Ms. Belton-Topman.
Thank you, Dr. Morrell, for the work that you've done over the past 5 years. Dr. Cash, Dr. Morrell, district members, this is legacy building work. This is setting a solid foundation, and I'm very proud of this. I'd like to share that last year when we started working, Eleanor Carla, Nadia Nassar, and myself, we started working on the Buffalo Public Schools calendar. We wanted to make it more culturally relevant. And we were able to have a little subcommittee conversation in April, because it was 1 year to the date of our resolution that the district did as far as making April Arab American Heritage Month. And we were able to get Nadia, Dr. Nadia Nassar was able to provide us with some educational information. And Dr. Fatima and Eleanor, I'm going to be sending over the next phase that Nassar has done in regards to the month of May, which we celebrate our Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. It includes our Jewish American Heritage Month. It also includes Better Hearing and Speech Month. And it also includes our grandparents, our senior adults. Many of our children are parented by their grandparents. And so there will be, each month, the goal is to add more and more to our calendar to let our children know about our diversity as a community, and we're preparing them to be international citizens so that when they leave Buffalo Public Schools, they're not locked into a box. They have been educated. And my ultimate goal is to expand each one of these, but I am going to try to get some community partners to provide some incentives for our children. It may only be a $10 gift card or whatever if they write an essay or something, but something to help them to stretch beyond themselves to see what other people and their cultures are. One of the things I learned after reading Nadia Nassar's Arab American Heritage is that I always thought the majority of Arab Americans were Muslims, and only to find that they are not. They're Christians. So that was mind-blowing for me, because over the years, the amount of Muslim people that I have around me, I always thought that they, the majority of them, but that wasn't the case. So even at my age, I'm still learning about cultural diversity, and I'm excited about that. So Dr. Cash, what we've just, we had talked about this last year about expanding the calendar each year. And this is what we're going to be working on moving forward for the summer, to expand our calendar so it'll be a little bit more inclusive, okay? So just wanted to share that with the board. Yeah. And it's easy work. These people are really excited about doing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Hurd, you had a question? And Mr. Scott. Mr. Hurd, did you still have a question? While we're waiting.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Please go.
Okay. Thank you. Dr. Morrell, I'd like to say congratulations. I love all the work that you're doing with the MBK program and working with our youth and the programs that you have set up for them. This is very exciting to see a program of this magnitude be exhibited here in the city of Buffalo. I remember coming up in the city of Buffalo, we never had a program like this before, or any programs for youth that was teaching about our history, teaching about our future, helping with education, reading, math. I mean, all the subjects that you touch, all the bases that you touch, and being at a number of your events, I just see the attitudes of the children and the change that they have, going to 7th and 8th grade, and as these groups come into high school, I can see a different freshman class coming into our high school system that's going to be more endured towards education, learning, and concerned about their future as well as others. We also have the My Brother's Keeper program that we run also with the Say Yes, and it's like working with the MBK program. Today we did Wednesday workout, where we have a group of kids. I believe we have about 60 kids online, and we did workouts today. So push-ups, sit-ups, dumbbells, barbells, working along together. So I mean, it's a direct coalition, the things that we can do with our kids and working with our kids. And I know we got Monday with guest speaking, and Friday we had guest speakers, and also go over our lesson plans for classwork. So I'll continue on with your work, and I'm just one of your biggest admirers for it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hurd. Thank you.
Mr. Scott, you had a question?
Just a quick question for Dr. Morrell, along the lines of Sharon mentioning the calendar being more culturally responsive. Do we have an update on the student project to rename what was Columbus Day Has the closure stalled that work? Where are we headed with it right now?
Colleagues, let me answer that. Let me answer that because I want to be real about it. Once we got into the COVID environment, that took a back seat. We were not prioritizing that work at that time. Certainly, there's certain students and some students that could be re-engaged around this. I've talked to Ann and Dr. Morrell recently about it, and we'll have something ready to report to you about it. But that hasn't been a consistent pipe during this time. We only have so much staff energy and focus, and I'll take the blame for that. I've had them full speed on all of this other work, but we'll get you a report probably next month and see where the students are.
And
thank you,
no blame intended, just inquiring.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
I think it's fair to say that there's a lot that's been put on pause right now, but I know that I personally really appreciate it's still on the list and that it's still being moved forward or at least it's there and we're going to work on it when you can. So, can we hear you now? Did that get resolved?
Ann is on the phone.
I'm on the phone. Can you hear me?
Certainly can.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if we could back the slides up to instructional guidance, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, one more the other way, Mike. There you go. Okay, so I hope everyone can hear me. I'm still in a picture, but I've muted that and I'm on the phone now. So hopefully there's no feedback. So I just wanted to say this has been an unprecedented event, and I think we've all agreed on that. But our teachers have risen to the occasion, our administrators have risen to the occasion, and our parents have risen to the occasion. As a parent who is currently homeschooling 2 children, I can agree with all the sentiments that this is not easy work. So trying to have your own job during the day while your kids are also online with their teachers and asking questions and needing support, it's a lot. And so I understand all the sentiment that has been expressed across the community, I think, because this is just across the nation, really. This is just nothing we've ever experienced before. But I want to say how wonderful parents have been and how wonderful our teaching staff has been. They have adapted to this new environment in ways that we could not have anticipated. So I think someone earlier asked about support for teachers in this time. And I do want to say that we're offering a lot of technical assistance and professional development to them. So if you log into our Schoology accounts or you look at the workplace, you can see any question that a teacher poses is immediately answered by someone either in IT, if it's a technical question, or someone at the other end, multilingual or curriculum or special ed, because we want to be as responsive as possible, knowing that teachers aren't used to this environment, right? Best practice is still really emerging for remote learning. Nobody was really in that space to such a degree in the past. So as we learn new practices, we're creating professional development sessions. So for example, over the past couple of days, we've had 60 or so teachers who have logged in and taken our new professional development opportunity for remote learning. So we start that by asking teachers to take a pause and just consider their own health and wellness and really center themselves before moving to the rest of the presentation, which is about how to connect with kids through remote learning. So we're trying to be really mindful of everyone's space and place right now as we move forward. So anytime you have additional suggestions, we appreciate those because we'll continue to develop more trainings for teachers and administrators, and we'll continue to offer technical assistance. In the beginning, it was really important for us to get teachers to a place where they knew the technology well enough to operate it. So at the very outset, a lot of the work that we did was about how to use Schoology effectively, how to use Infinite Campus effectively, how do you use LifeSize? I'm sure we had people that had never heard of it until this happened, and now it's sort of a piece of daily life in Buffalo. But that was a big focus, and now we're moving more toward the pedagogical and the content areas of the instruction. So that being said, when you look at our instructional guidance document, which I hope people have had a chance to peruse, but there is a link toward the left bottom of the slide if people haven't had a chance or they want to just revisit the document. We kind of laid out our expectations for instruction, knowing that there was a digital divide, so that some students would be using the hard copy learning packets we provided, while other students might be using remote instruction practices, and some are probably using a combination of the two. So we wanted to be mindful that it wasn't one single way that students might be connecting with their teaching, with their teachers. So for example, we've already distributed 2 learning packets at this point. We're preparing the 3rd to go out, which should take us through to the rest of the year. And then remote learning, we've got a lot of teachers using Schoology. You can see some of the statistics to the right of the screen. Some, you can see the assessments they've created, assignments they've created, discussion threads. So you can start a discussion with students and they can respond on sort of a chat board to get their input if they've read the article, what their thoughts were about the lesson, et cetera. And then you can see how many students have participated in those opportunities. But I do want to emphasize Schoology is just one of our platforms. So this data doesn't capture everything that's going on with teaching. So a lot of our teachers use Class Dojo. Many of them use Remind, which is another app that allows them to communicate with parents. For our multilingual families, we also make use of Talking Points. And I know we've discussed it before, but just as a reminder, it's a 2-way communication device. So the teacher can speak, you know, can discuss things in English, and the parent hears it in his or her own language. And then when the parent speaks in her own language, it comes back to the teacher in English. So that's one of the many ways we're connecting with families. So there's just a lot of different methods people are using right now. We already had purchased Nearpod, which allows us to design lessons that can be self-paced. So a teacher can design the lesson, release it to students through Schoology, and students can complete it at their own pace. And there's embedded questions that they respond to. You can embed videos, you can embed virtual tours, but teachers get the feedback from the completion of those lessons. Then a lot of teachers are doing readings or taping themselves teaching a lesson and asking kids to respond to that. A lot of our math teachers are making use of the Eureka videos. So Eureka is the original vendor that developed the math modules that we use. And they've branched off since then, but when COVID broke out, they started videotaping their own lessons. So our teachers can link to those expert lessons and have students participate in the, like watch the lesson and do the activities. And then our teachers can ask the kids to complete an exit ticket so they get a sense of whether or not the student understood the instruction. But some teachers are taping themselves doing lessons, and then they release it to the students, and the students complete the activities that go with that videotaped lesson. Other teachers are doing virtual office hours. So the kids come in and they have sort of a meeting together, and the teacher can answer questions about what the kids have been working on. So I just say all this to let you know that there's a very broad group of or ways, methods that teachers can use to connect with their students for instructional purposes. And in many cases, they're doing it over the phone. So they might be calling the student directly, knowing that the student doesn't have a strong internet connection. So I just would like it to be understood that there's no one way that we are reaching our kids when it comes to instruction. And sometimes teachers are using all of these methods at the same time because they know that every student's in a unique circumstance. And then we also can look and see how well our students are engaging by checking to see if they've been submitting assignments. And that can look different. They might be submitting them through Schoology. They might be submitting them through Class Dojo. They might be taking a picture and emailing it to their teacher because they might not have the technology. Sometimes, I actually just watched in Workplace, a student opened up the math work that they'd been doing and showed the teacher page by page all of the completed assignments so that they could verify they'd been working on it. So the kids are getting creative with the ways they're able to submit work as well. A lot of it right now is virtual, but you can't capture everything by just looking at Schoology, even though that is probably the #1 platform. So our guidance broaches the methods of instruction, ways that we can look at engagement with students, and also does discuss things beyond academic engagement, because we know a lot of our students are receiving teletherapy, they're participating in CSE actions, et cetera. So there's a lot of other venues to know that we are connecting with our students. Mike, if you can go to the next slide. Mike Lucci, thank you. And then in the instructional document, we also talk about our grading procedures. And I imagine it would be simpler for this conversation if I just sort of walked everyone through the basics, unless you feel like that's not necessary.
Board members, what are we feeling about that?
I'm good.
Walk through, or can we move on?
Move on.
Okay.
Okay, then move on.
Okay.
Okay.
You can go to the next slide. Mike, there you go, thank you. One of the other things that we did want to briefly discuss is our conceptualizations for summer school. I'm sure you're aware we're waiting to hear whether we're allowed back in the building at summer. So in July, we're not sure yet. We should hopefully hear in the next week or two. But in the meantime, we're trying to plan creatively. We know that we need to refine our 7-12 program because it's highly likely this will be a remote program. And so what we already had is a brick and mortar program with some remote. So we're going to capitalize on the practice we've had with the remote learning piece in the past and refine the existing 7-12 program. And then we're developing a pre-K 6 program because we really haven't had anything for summer schools probably in the past 10 years or so. And anything we had before wasn't even the same set of standards. So now we are talking about programs for reading and math. And we are also partnering with Say Yes, and we want to provide as much as we can in terms of a whole child focus. So thinking about nutrition, thinking about students' wellness, thinking about the social emotional supports that they might need to be successful, because we know how traumatic this experience has been for many of our students. So we want to make sure we're taking those things into account as we develop that pre-K 6 program, which is not to say we won't also consider those things for high school, but I just want to make a special point of it because Say Yes will be partnering with us to develop some of that. So then we have two possible plans in the works. One is entirely virtual. So in that case, all students would be accessing remote instruction. We continue to research best practices, right? They're all emerging. So there's research all over the place right now. And we've been trying to pull that together and really think about the best ways to reach our students. We'll be working with IT to talk about pre-K 2, because if this is remote, we know that we had not deployed one-to-one devices for those grade bands. So IT has a few creative thoughts about what we might do to service those students so that they have access. And we also are looking at other avenues to see if there's funding available from other sources to pay for some of that. And then we also know that we'll still have to have some hard copy packets because there's just going to be situations where we aren't able to connect with everyone remotely. So we'll have that as another option for students. If we're able to go with Plan B, sort of a blend, we would pilot a very small program with students on campus, and then most of the instruction would still be remote, but that would allow us to help some kids who might struggle with access issues. Again, we don't know yet, but if we are able to go back in any small capacity, we'd make sure that we are following CDC guidelines and applying all the protocols as appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Colleagues, these are just conceptualizations, and I didn't want to give the impression that these were what we were going to do, but certainly I have a team formed that's working hard on scenario A, scenario B, and scenario C. If we are able to safely open up one or more brick facilities, we certainly would follow all of the safety protocols and make sure that if they weren't in place with testing and temperature and PPE equipment and all of that, then we'll stay away. The governor may, in fact, in a week or two, say that we can't, that buildings are out for summer school. So this is all fluid right now. We just wanted to give you how some of our thinking has been up to this point.
I appreciate that. I have two questions, one from Mr. Petrucci and one from Mr. Hurd, but first I'd like to ask just two overarching questions. One is about taking into account what you just said, Dr. Cash, about needing to work with New York State and get some more guidance about whether or not buildings can be open. Do you have a sense of generally when summer school might take place, or are we just waiting on New York State and then planning out from there?
We have established dates, which we would have to be flexible with if the state changes something. But we had already released the summer school dates for July and August.
So those are stable. Okay, thank you. And then
again, we'll be flexible if we need to. We know that we have to.
Those have not changed or otherwise from the state is a more accurate way of putting it, I think. And then my second question is how this works with students with disabilities, both in terms of the supports that they receive right now in this disruption period, and also how they would be, their needs would be addressed in terms of summer school, and how, with grading particularly, it becomes complicated with students with IEPs, how that's going to be handled, because there's a separate document also that says satisfactory progress, not satisfactory, it's still developing. I can't remember the exact titles off the top of my head, and I should. Can you comment a little bit about that? And then I'd like to go over to the questions from Mr. Petrucci and Mr. Hurd, at least so far.
Sure. So that was several questions, but in terms of promotion for special education, so we always take into account, at K-8, we always take into account the evaluation of whether a student has met or is making progress on IEP goals. So that's part of any decision that is made regarding promotion or retention. So it's not strictly just the grade that the student earns, because that has to be taken into account. And then you asked about ESY, or are you just asking about special ed in the summer in general?
I'm talking about special ed in the summer in general. And just to clarify about, let's do it one at a time, because you're right, I did bombard you. Sorry about that. What I'd like to find out a little bit is about that promotion, because it's difficult for students who may not be able to receive the same amount of support, or who are more at risk in terms of the disruptions to their schedules and their environments. Is there some leeway that we could do in terms of or making progress in making those determinations about promotion? If students aren't making progress on their IEPs, will we be able to take into account the circumstances?
I absolutely, we would be taking that into account. I think teachers would be understanding that as they assess whether kids are making any type of progress. Remember, it's progress toward IEP goals. It doesn't mean they have to have met them 100%. So a lot of this is a case-by-case decision and discussion at the building level. And sometimes parents would say, I would prefer that they not move forward. So again, it's always a discussion.
It's a discussion, but that would take place in a CSE meeting as well. So I appreciate that, because some of the parents of students with disabilities have been very concerned with that. So I appreciate that it would be looked at in an individual situation. And then the question is about placement and how summer school might be run for students with disabilities.
Sure. So there's two types of summer school. There's general summer school, and then there's ESY, which is our extended school year. And we had already captured the potential regression formula before we went out. So they actually have that information about who would qualify for ESY. And then we're still a little bit in the thinking phases about what ESY might look like, because if we don't come back, it would still continue to be things like teletherapy. So they're still trying to work through some of the scenarios for that program. And then in terms of special education in general, when students attend summer school, they do not necessarily get all of the modifications in the summer school program, but we would address their needs as appropriate. So we would look at it, again, it's always a discussion. Pre-K to 6, it's a new program. So we would have some flexibility to determine what is appropriate and not appropriate in terms of the supports and moving forward for students, promotion and or retention. And then we are actually revisiting some of our 7-8 protocols in light of the fact that it's going to be remote. So those will be ongoing discussions, but we always want to support our special education students during the summer. So we work with them as much as we can. In the past, we've tried to provide every modification that was available to us, et cetera. So again, if there's additional thoughts, we appreciate the feedback.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your answers. Thank you, Mr. Petrucci and Mr. Hurd, for waiting. Mr. Petrucci, you are up. And Ms. Dalton-Cotman, you will be after Mr. Hurd.
Thank you, Dr. Rivera. So just as a point of clarification, so we're talking summer school for children that that haven't passed during the school year, or are we talking a summer session for all students or students that volunteer to go to prevent the summer slide and keep them on grade level going into the fall? I guess that's what, I know some districts are talking about starting school in August or having something during the summer because most kids haven't been in school since March. Parents have been doing great, our teachers have been doing great, but there's that concern that that this is new and unique and we don't know the results that we're going to get. So I just want clarity that we're talking specifically summer school, not a summer session. Second question would be I know that oftentimes our children that struggle the most are often those that are most disengaged with the district. So if we have a child in an individual classroom who just is sporadically or inconsistently handing in their work assignments, who isn't engaging on some of the remote videos, the remote learning opportunities, is it up to the individual teacher to reach out to them? Are principals reaching out to them? How are we kind of doing outreach and making sure that they're engaged at the level that they need to be successful? Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let me say, Ann, let me say something about the first one and maybe even the second one. So thank you for those questions, Lou. Those are important questions. The first one is all of the above. I didn't want this summer school concept to be just for a particular group of students who are struggling. That's historically and traditionally what summer schools are for. But if we have virtual, which could be the main delivery system still going through the summer and in many ways into the new year, so many unknowns. I want something for everybody. I want something for everyone. Doesn't have to be required, but as you just saw on the prior slide, for example, we're building more and more resources for kids all across the cognitive spectrum. So I want kids who can accelerate and go fast and want, they're just like a sponge and soak up knowledge and soak up information. I want them to be learning and moving throughout the summer virtually and have access to a lot of resources. And then also the other groups as well, students who are struggling, students who got an incomplete on their report card for the year. We're going to try to have programs matched to the needs of all of our students, but maybe in 2 or 3 buckets or 2 and 3 main categories. So that's that question. On the second one, could you repeat what the question is?
Sure, Dr. Cash. I just worried that I just know historically our kids that have struggled the most have been the most disengaged. So I'm worried about those that either are randomly or sporadically handing in assignments or haven't been engaged at all. Just what we're doing to engage those kids, the type of outreach. Does it fall upon the teacher? Is it one of the is it a clerk in the office? Is it the principal? Is it one of our attendance teachers? I'm just kind of curious to see what kind of outreach we're doing to make sure that these kids are engaged.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, Ann, you can deal with some of it, as you know that your staff, the efforts they're making. And then I think Tanja will also have a really nice elucidation of that question in her set of slides. So Ann, you do the part that you like to respond to. And then when we get to Dr. Williams' set of slides, Lou, you will elaborate on that even more.
Absolutely. So we are able to identify now students who may not have connected because multiple teachers are reporting, like, I haven't reached this child, or, I haven't, but so-and-so has. So we have a better handle using the student tracker on which particular students need the most support. But I would safely say that principals already knew, teachers already knew students who needed a better connection with us in general. And I think that they have acted on that pretty expeditiously. I know principals and teachers are constantly engaged in discussions during grade levels, at faculty meetings, and private conversations about ways to connect with students. And the social workers, psychologists, and counselors are reaching out. All of our special education teachers are constantly reaching out to their students. Our ENL teachers are constantly reaching out for additional supports. Say Yes has helped with that. I know Tanja will speak a little bit to it. So there's a lot of different ways and different people who are trying to connect with some of these kids. And I can speak specifically to multilingual right now because anyone who reports that someone is struggling making contact with the student, the multilingual department immediately contacts the school, talks to the principal and the teachers, figures out the best way to reach that, like what the phone number is, et cetera. And then they're having the academic coaches from Journey's End actually contact those kids and potentially visit them if needed. Because we know that one of those populations that we struggle with in terms of connecting can be the multilingual population for various reasons, but we don't want to lose sight of that. So between using talking points and teacher connections and principal connections, we also have our central office departments who are trying to support that work as well.
And colleagues, I always think it's useful. I think it's useful to give some granular examples on the ground. Toya, I know, for example, at MST, before we went into the shutdown period, there was one staff member, one of Kevin's assistant principals, I believe, that had come up with a really innovative program of outreach and connecting with students. Others of you are doing some fabulous work around connecting with seniors to make sure that they're getting all of their work done, even while senioritis is taking hold in many of our young people. And then Kantan and Darlene, if you have any examples of how we're connecting and reaching out, I think it's important sometimes to give a specific example. Toya, do you know what I'm referring to?
Yes. So, good evening, everyone.
And any other thing you want to say, Toya? I didn't want to catch you off guard.
That's okay. MST has been working with an EWI, an early warning indicator facilitator, who has really been what they've been calling the connector. She has been that glue that pulls everyone together, breaks down the silos, makes sure that whatever a student needs, sometimes one staff member may know about it, and the critical staff member who needs to connect that student to a program or another support may not be fully in the know. She has been seen as that glue and really supporting the whole team. It's been a team effort. But recently, MST also worked along with, they've been working on the school redesign. And they've been engaging in this work of really reaching out to families to find out for sure which students really love this type of environment, as Dr. Cash mentioned earlier. So they're doing surveys of their students to say, how are you feeling about this? Could this model work for you going forward? What could we do to add to when we return to school in this new normal that we're all living in right now? How do we support you as you return and engage you in some of these things that you feel like worked well for you? So that's some of the work that's happening at MST.
That's a good example. Anyone else have a concrete example from the schools?
Good evening, Dr. Cass and board. This is Kantan Dabney.
Hi, Kantan.
Hi, Kantan.
So I just want to echo some of the comments that were made earlier. The AFLs and I, we meet with our principals weekly, but we talk to them daily. Some of those connections that principals are making and ensuring that their schools are making go to outreach. We have principals that are visiting homes. I know that was mentioned earlier. Principals are doing the delivery of the materials like the devices and the packets, but they're really making an effort to make sure that each and every one of their students are being connected. So before the tracker system, principals already had in place systems where they were ensuring that their teachers were reaching out to families.
This is Darlene Jezanowski. Good evening, board members and Dr.
Good
Cash.
evening, Darlene.
Good evening. I just, I want to reiterate exactly what Contan was saying and my colleagues, but I also want to say, I know one of my principals actually went to one of our ENL families to drop off materials because they didn't have it, and the family was so thrilled that they couldn't believe a principal came to their home with materials to ensure that that child was getting exactly what they needed. At another school, a principal has been monitoring contact with every family. She's reached out to families where parents where teachers weren't able to do that, and ensuring that she is making contact with them on a regular basis and ensuring that her teachers are. And that's district-wide with our principals. They've had this tracking system since the beginning, as soon as we went into our COVID-19 practices, and they've made significant impact and working with our families, ensuring that they have everything that they need. As soon as they hear anything, they make sure they reach out to the SST to reach out to families. They reach out to Tanja's office to provide the support that they need, and even to some of our partners, our Say Yes partners that are working in the schools.
Do they take notes, colleagues, Darlene and others, when they go out to the schools, the principals, do they take notes when they ask questions and have conversations with the families, you know, to say, without prying too much, because it's a delicate balance, but, you know, are you okay? You know, are you well? Anything we can do for you? That kind of thing. Talking to the parents, talking to the students. Are they taking notes about that?
Absolutely. And then they make sure that anything, again, if any family conveys to them that they need additional support, we make sure that they get it, whether it's through our lunch program, letting them know what's available. If they need additional materials, making sure we get it to the families. If they need the laptops, making sure they get those to the families. So, and again, if they need any social emotional support, they make sure they reach out to Tanja's office to ensure that the families get that need met.
Oh, there you go. Thank you. And I think
So
some
I
other
believe
people had their hand up, but I can't see it.
Yeah, I can. So Dr. Wright and Mr. Samato, I believe, want to give some examples, and then I want to move to the question from Mr. Hurd and Ms. Belton-Cotman.
Okay.
I wanted to amplify the fact that it's not only the academic supports that the principals are ensuring that the students have. I have a principal who's been delivering groceries because the lunches and the breakfasts that they collect, that is a huge help. But some of our families have large and extended family members within their households, and it just wasn't enough. So we have principals who are purchasing groceries and delivering them to homes. We know that some of our children have been dislocated, and now they are living in homes of relatives, and they've needed clothing. So principals have bought clothing for families. So to Dr. Cash's point about taking notes, they take exceptional notes, and then they act on them. So we have groups of teachers who organize when there's a birthday, and they go to a child's home with signs singing birthday wishes to them. So they've been doing innovative and extraordinary things to maintain that connection, because this is a very hard time, and it can be hard for people to express their deepest needs. But the more you communicate with someone, the more you maintain close contact, the more they open up, and that's what we're finding is happening.
Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you.
Tino.
Mr. Samato. Okay. I think we may have lost him. If you need to jump in again, Mr. Samato, please feel free. Oh,
I
you got
apologize.
it. Okay.
Now, I did not be too repetitive. So our principals are working even, we've mentioned the motorcades, even with community school navigators and going to homes where they can use some translation services and social distancing from a sidewalk to make sure that that is occurring. You know, communication and engagement, as I mentioned before, have been ultimately the key point for everyone, including with the teachers. You know, principals are organizing staff to make sure that everyone's taking care of themselves so they could take care of the kids as well. So it's really been a huge community effort across the board and just making wellness the top priority.
Thank you, Tino.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hurd, you're up with your question. I also have on the list Ms. Belton Cotman and Ms. Woods.
Okay, my heart goes out to the principals and teachers that's going beyond the call of duty to help out with the children, help with education and the food program. The food program is one of the it's on the agenda next week for the educational support, and we will talk more about that again next week. And I mean, just hearing that the principal is actually going out for the kids' birthdays is phenomenal. It's a credit to what our district is doing. I'd like to backpedal a little bit. I had a parent that spoke to me with concerns, and I don't know if the district's already doing this or this is up to the individual schools, but they would like to see a parent-teacher conference day so they can find out where their child is educationally. I know that the teachers are reaching out to the parents on a daily basis, but they would like to see a parent-teacher conference day if that's not being done. I'm not quite sure if it's just different from each school. From school. Also, they're saying that it's, you can receive a report from the turnout of the report with the student, and also if they're not having any contact with them. Another reason was because of the kids that's graduating, they'll be going to college, so they can have a understanding and with the district and also with the board about the context with college and find out where our kids are going and if they're going to another educational program after high school, which we all plan. The second question is backpedaling just a little bit was the grading process. I know we skipped over it and we decided to skip over it, but I would like also, because we have parents who have children in their class, I mean, in their homes, that's in multiple different classes. And some may be K through 12, some may be 3 through 6, some may be 7 through 12. And it's kind of confusing to them to find out what the grading pattern is. So if someone can actually give, if somebody listening online, they can actually tell them where they can find out about the grading structure that we use, because we're using 3 different structures for 3 different levels of children. So that that could be maybe on a web page or direct them to that to where they can find out where that PowerPoint will be at to help them out with that.
Mike Lucci, can you go back 2 slides? Mike? Oh, actually stay here. You're good here. Thank you. So I hyperlinked from this PowerPoint, but you can actually find this on our website. If you go to the main page and scroll down to District News, the document is called BPS Instructional Guidance Document During Period of Extended Closure. And it is available to everyone. And then I think some schools have links to it from their own web pages, et cetera. But we're planning to do one mailing to just capture the grading practice and send that to parents as well, so they have a hard copy of it. But teachers can also answer questions about it, and administrators can answer questions about it if they want to call as well.
Okay, thank you. And thank you so much. And the last question was about summer school. That's also going to be addressed next week on the Educational Support Committee. I know that we might receive a report from the governor by that time, where we might have a better understanding about locations. It's going to be virtual. Also about students that are struggling. What Dr. Cass said, you know, he wanted to work with all students and students that's incomplete. So that's some of the things that we have concerns about. And there's 1,000 questions about summer school that's lying out there, so we can get a better understanding what direction that we be going in, and also love the enhanced learning so that we can try to work with students that maybe took a test or exam before, and they can better their grades. I know this district has worked very hard to try to format it so that the kids can better their grades, and other districts across the country are utilizing this tool right now. And I don't want our kids to be left behind, and because other states are practicing where they can better their kids' grades, where they can get into a college institution, and before our kids can. So that's one of the other things. And so we'll be addressing some of the other things next week. That's the summer school. If we can receive another report on that next week, and that'll be great.
Just so you know,
the last thing was, I apologize. Last thing was some of our kids receive traumas in their life, you know, from this coronavirus. And so some things happen in their lives and their families. So that I know we talked about special education IEPs, but can we find something to address the kids that may be exhibiting some mental distress also and might be affecting their grades and learning at this time also for our summer program?
Yes, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that as well. And Tanja will have some thoughts about it in her next set of slides.
Mr. Hurd, I just wanted to, you mentioned bettering your grade on the Regents, but right now they've canceled both the June and the August Regents exams. So a student who wanted to try to improve their grade would be, the first opportunity would be in January.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Woods, you had a question.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My question is, I hear the teachers are doing a good job trying so hard to reach out to the students in this new environment, and I hear the principals trying to follow up, but my question simply is, if you just gave the students the laptops and you're just distributing them as of April 23rd, you're saying you made 80%, and you said 77 students, high school students, did not even have any internet access, so they didn't have the hotspots. The question that I'm saying is, what's the reality? That monitoring piece, I want to know what is the reality of, are the children actually getting the education? Are they actually logging on and getting the classes that the teachers are presenting? I know teachers who are saying, I may have 18 children in my class. Yes, I called the parents. The parents said they were going to log on, but the children did not log on. Only 5 out of the 18 logged on. And I know some parents that say, well, I'm not home, and the children are playing games on our laptops. They're not logging on. So my question is, what about the reality that a lot of children for March and April didn't have any way of logging on? And we do, I agree with you, Dr. Katz, we need summer school so that those children can catch up and that we can give them a quality education. But also the question is, doesn't attendance count for anything? I mean, if teachers calling, they're doing their best, and only 5 out of 18 children actually log on to get the education, what happened to attendance teachers logging what the real attendance is, and maybe even somehow testing whether the children actually learned anything? Because I think the summer school is going to be definitely necessary, because a lot of children fell behind, gave up hope. I'm getting this from parents, and we're not doing as great as we think we are. I guess what I'm saying.
Well, let me say this to that. We're humble about this work. We're not saying we're doing great. We're saying we're doing the very best we can. And I always said in the education jargon that this is a two-way street. When we're in school, we have the heavy lift. We're out of school, the parents have a heavy lift. That's just the reality of it. And what we're doing is to do everything we can to help. So if you know about something like this, we have a helpline. You can take names. You can pass them forward to us. We have a big, small district. And what does that mean? It's not so big that we can't reach out and make a connection, even if it's driving up to and knocking on the door. We'll do that. You heard about that principals are trying to do that. So folks have to reach both ways. It's not all on the district during a time like this. It's teamwork. So I want to hear what parents are trying to do, what they're trying to do, and how they can reach out to us, because we're right here. We want to contact every single parent, every single kid. So no, we're not resting on any laurels here. This is hard work. And it's going to be hard work for the next several years. And it's going to get really, really hard if we get a 20% cut in our federal aid and our state aid. Okay? So I want more attitude about what they can do to help us help them. What the district can do. Tell us. Work with us.
I'm just saying that a phone call to those 18 parents, they spoke to the parents, but it did not result in the children actually logging on and taking the class and doing the work. So I'm saying we do have this reporting that we can see that the children didn't log on, and that's the fact. I don't think that the 5 out of 18 is a rarity. I'm not saying it's the majority, but I'm saying it's a significant portion to be worried about, and that we need some summer school to address it.
Well, you gotta keep working at it. You gotta keep trying. You fall down 7 times, get up 8. Keep trying, keep working, keep pushing. We're here. We're gonna help you. Keep working. Keep trying to get through.
I have to say, I look forward to the data from the contact form, because that'll give some insight into what may be happening. You know, it's a difficult time. This is a lot of this is educational crisis management. We're working on this, and I think what Dr. Cash says about thinking about this long term, about how we're responding now, but also how we're going to be responding in the next 4 to 5 years is really important, because this will have a lasting impact across the nation for students who are in school now. And this is going to be something we're going to be thinking about long term. I really like the idea that he brought up 2 meetings ago about looking at this year as a full year, not as a separation, but in terms of continuity about what needs to be done. And I'm looking forward to hearing some more insight and direction, both from parent groups, teachers, administrators, and board members about how to move forward with that. So I also believe Ms. Dalton-Cotman had a question, and Mr. Scott had a question.
Yes, I do. Thank you.
We're starting to kind of run over at 7:09 already, and I know that we still need to talk about budget, as Dr. Cash pointed out.
Right. We need to take time to get these questions answered also, though. I have a question. It brought to my attention that we're not doing anything with the teacher aides and teacher assistants. Do we have any plans to incorporate them into helping with our children and their achievement? They've been an integral part of their day-to-day activity prior to, closing schools. How can we better use them to help us? Is, I guess, my question, and I don't necessarily have to have an answer now, but it's just a thought, since they are part of the process. And Zettatelli, you years ago you had, and I don't know if it's on the website, but you had for each child's school grade year what their accomplishments should be. Do you still have that tool? It was a beautiful, you pulled it together, it had every grade. You know what I'm talking about?
The grade level expectations.
Okay, yeah, the grade level expectations.
Yeah, those are still on the website. They're under the curriculum division.
Okay.
I can send you a link if you want.
Thank you. Do you think that we could provide that again to our parents so that they can understand where their children should be in this cycle? I heard the conversation about having parent-teachers conferences. I don't know if we can contractually do that, but I would like for them to at least know that this tool is out there, because it was a great tool and I was very impressed with it when you presented it to us. And so I just think that would help parents understand if their children are on target, or where they should be or not.
I think that's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. And you're going to do a mail out. I don't know if you're going to do a mail out. I don't know if in that package, the mail out you were talking about doing in regards to the grades, that you include some tools. Now, Dr. Cash, this is not new news. I've been trying to get you to do some sort of a superintendent academy for the summer. What about a virtual academy with challenging ideas and things for children to do the superintendent's corner or something that takes those children to the next level. You, in your presentation, you talked about your 2 examples. And what I'm concerned about are the children who have achieved what they were supposed to do this year, and now they're trying to get to the next level. Just some websites or things that the parents can go to, just providing some additional support with that. Okay.
Right.
And
I like that.
Okay, thank you. And I guess the final thing that I want to say is that when I looked at the summer school, I really felt that there was a need for a conversation about a third option. And from my perspective, and I'm thinking that perspective would include the virtual Dr. Cash's or the superintendent's virtual academy, or challenging ideas, or would connect kids to different websites. There are a lot of free math websites out there and things like that that would help the parents, particularly the ones who are really engaged and want to see their children excel, because we do have children that are doing very good in this environment.
Yeah.
And we have teachers that have moved them, that have really finished their curriculum. I've talked to several teachers who told me that they finished their curriculum already for this year. So those are just a few ideas that I wanted to throw out. Thank you.
Oh, Mrs. Cotman, thank you for saying that. Actually, Tara Sims, who's the director of the summer school program, she has been combing through different websites to look for enrichment activities. So she's been looking at NASA to see some of the programs they have, the museums, programs that they're offering. So those are things we talked about, directing kids to after the main English and math programming at the elementary, but giving them these additional opportunities if they were interested.
Well, I know of 2 math programs that are out there that are virtual and they're free. And of course, that's what we want to focus in on, providing as many resources without cost to our children. So I'll be happy to share those 2.
That's right.
Thank you.
Those are all good. Miss Dr. Rivera, do you have any more from your board members for this section? Any more
I have one last one from Mr. Scott.
Okay.
One more question from Mr. Scott.
I'm good. To save time, move on.
Mr. Scott?
And
I'm good. You can move on.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm sorry, Mr. Petrucci? You had a question?
Not really a question, but more kind of a comment, and hopefully something we can do. A retired teacher reached out to me because it's Teacher Appreciation Week. She was trying to come up with something we can do to show that the students can do to show appreciation for their teachers. Her suggestion was that we ask our students to put a star in the window to let them know that their teachers are, rock star, rap stars, movie stars, superstars, something along those lines, so we could get the kids engaged and to show the support for their teachers during Teacher Appreciation Week. So I thought I'd put it out there for the board for its thought and consideration.
Thank you, Lou.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. To appreciate teachers.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So Dr. Williams,
I think we're ready for our work.
Dr. Williams has a few slides, colleagues, that go into the social emotional wellness aspect of our work, arguably the most important part of our work during this time. So, Dr. Williams, if you could take us through your 3 slides, please.
I sure will. Good evening, board members, superintendent, and colleagues. This will be the last set of slides for this particular presentation, but it certainly is no less important. I think that social emotional wellness sometimes can be invisible and it can be difficult to measure, but I think that this piece is probably what keeps many of us up at night. I think we are all, and I've heard it as a common thread in many of the questions that have been asked tonight. I think that we are all intensely concerned about all of our children and making sure that we're meeting the needs of the whole child, which certainly does include the social emotional wellness. When children are social emotionally well, they certainly are better positioned for academic success. So this is a really important section. I think it speaks to the bargain when we talk about the whole child. There is, a huge component that deals with social and emotional wellness in addition to the academic achievement of students. So you will see sections throughout this short presentation that talk about the importance of our community partners and our parents partnering with us to help to ensure that we're meeting the needs of the whole child. Can move forward, please. So my team has been working really hard. We're meeting several times a day, each and every day. And what we've created is a 3-tiered approach. And we know, some of you are familiar with the triangles for PBIS, where we talk about all children and what all children get. It's no different in this approach. There are some supports that we provide that are accessible to all of our students, families, and staff. And then there are some that are more targeted, and those are the tier 2 of interventions, and I'll talk a little bit about those. But then even when we're doing tiers 1 and 2, there are some families that will require even more intense, individualized support. And I'll talk a little bit about our tier 3 piece. What's different here than normal is that we've included staff. And so we're concerned about the wellness of our staff. HR does a great job, I think, with the EAP supports that they provide. Student support typically and historically has been concerned about the wellness of students, but there are some supports that we're providing for our staff, which I'll talk a little bit about.
Yes.
Okay, can move
Thank
forward.
You.
So for tier 1, these are again the supports that we're providing for every single child and family in our district. And these are the supports that are more preventive in nature, they're informational, and they help to reduce the anxiety of students, families, and staff. So when you see things listed on this side, and I'll talk a little bit about it, like student placement assignments, you may wonder, why does that have anything to do with wellness? But it certainly can be an anxiety-provoking time when parents don't know where their children will be assigned in the next few months. So we view that as a part of meeting the need of a whole child and a whole family. So to start at the top, we all know that we have the hotline number. It's been working quite effectively. I get telephone calls every day. And they don't all deal with wellness, which is what I'm listed as the contact for, but whatever I get a telephone call for, because parents sometimes just press, wherever they think they will be able to get a response, I'm able to navigate and to call my colleagues and to get answers almost immediately for families. We try to keep our website as fluid and up to date as we can. We're constantly looking at CDC updates, looking for best practices, research. So we're updating our website almost daily. We have been, I'm proud to say, providing professional development online. And that's a nuance for my particular division. But we have trained close to 2,000 teachers on things like mindfulness, trauma-informed care. We recently created a training on anti-bullying, and everything that we do, we really try to infuse the work that Dr. Morrell is doing. And so I'm always looking at whatever trainings we're doing and making sure that they are inclusive and that they are cultural and linguistically responsive. So we're getting our trainings translated, working with Nadia and her team, and just making sure that, I'm sorry, did you say something? Maybe it's some feedback. So we're always making sure that the photos that are in the trainings are responsive, that any scenarios that we set up are relevant, and those kinds of things. But I'm very proud because, again, this is a nuance for my department. And I had a meeting yesterday with our supplemental health partners, and they are creating a training for this summer specific to COVID-19, because whenever schools open back up, we want our building leaders trained on, all of the safety precautions and measures that they need to take. We want our teachers to know, and we want our parents to know. And so they're working on that piece right now, creating that kind of training. We started last Thursday. I'm very proud. Our parent and family engagement department started doing something a little different with respect to parent centers. And we are now every Thursday at 5 o'clock conducting what we call virtual parent center suites. And it's dealing with various issues or supports that the district has, and we're getting the word out. It's a live stream, and so parents and the community can access it. They can send in questions live. We found out that last Thursday we had close to 1,000 folks that viewed that particular training. I know that Ms. Botticelli and her team next week are scheduled to roll out the grading piece. And so I heard Mr. Hurd ask a question about how can we get the word out to parents. That certainly is one way. We're using social media outlets. We're using the website, robocalls to try to get the word out so that parents know that they can tune in. This Thursday, we have a couple of our school counselors that will be talking about supports for seniors and, how that is rolling out. So we're excited about that piece. That's every Thursday at 5 o'clock on Facebook Live. We also have had, the donations and the books that this community has, rallied and provided for our children has just been, unmeasurable. It's just, we've gotten brand new books, Disney books, because we know that our children right now, this is difficult. And that's, an escape. It's some enjoyment for our children, and our families just love getting these books. We've gotten scorecard games that help the children continue movement and wellness and all those kinds of things. It's really a family activity. And so those are handed out at our 28 sites. Our meal delivery, we're delivering meals to families that express that they have that kind of need. If transportation is an issue, we're delivering meals. We've got hundreds of volunteers that are helping us to get that done. At every site, this is another nuance, and I'm not so sure that across the country that this is being done, but we have RNs and LPNs who are school nurses who are at each of our sites where we're giving out meals. And, it brings a certain level of comfort, certainly, to all of the staff that are at these sites. But I think even more than that, it's providing some preventive health measures, some safety and wellness to make sure that everybody that's at those sites is engaging in safe behaviors. This week, Dr. Sue Baldwin has secured with Independent Health 10,000 wellness bag giveaways that we will be giving away to families. There are things in these bags like inflatable soccer balls and chalk, but also thermometers, which we know, are very difficult to get, masks, gloves. So those items will be available next week at our grab and go sites. We're doing temperature readings, another nuance. So the nurses that are at the 28 sites, every staff member that comes in every morning before they begin to work, they are taking their temperature. And that's not just the cafeteria staff, that includes the principal, the engineer, the security staff. And so, again, it's a wellness measure that's really proactive and preventative. We want to make sure if they're there that they're well and ready to work. We have supports for all of our seniors. We really have wrapped our arms around our seniors in particular. And so Ms. Younger has been working closely with principals, high school principals, to make sure that not a single senior is going to fall between the cracks. And so we're working with Say Yes and Gear Up to make sure that FAFSA forms are being completed for our seniors. Credit detail reports are being done. And when students are looking like they're veering into some difficulty or some troubles, the counselors have been sending those reports to Martha, and she's working with principals to do whatever they can do to get those students back on track. We also, with respect to student placement, I'm very, very pleased about the work that has been happening at student placement. There's been a reduction in telephone calls, and I think that some of that is happening because the work is continuing to progress. In spite of COVID-19, we have placed all of our high school students. That's a couple thousand students, actually it's more than that, that are moving from 8th grade to 9th grade. We're placing our gifted and talented students. We're working right now on getting our kindergarten placements solidified. And so that work is moving forward. We have put up a bi-weekly update on the website so that parents can go to that website and see what's going on with their children's assignments. So those are just some of the Tier 1 supports that we're doing for all of our students. Should I take questions now on that piece, or do you want to wait until?
I think so.
Wait.
Okay.
Okay.
Colleagues, do you want anything on Tier 1 or you want to wait?
Let's wait till the end, I suggest.
I just had one question before you move forward.
Sure.
Dr. Tanja Williams, you said that you had established masks and gloves grab-and-go sites. Could you please tell us where that'd be located at?
Yes, we have 28 sites that are providing meals. Yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
They're available for any
I was
family.
quite sure it was going to be all 20.
That's just in what the wellness bags. So we don't necessarily have those for everybody, Tanja, right? We just have 10,000 wellness bags that has that. Or do we have other sources of PPE equipment?
Right now we have 10,000. And so, you know, we're not going to turn anyone away. So the families that come and that need them, but we can't, you know, we'll have to develop a system so that we're not giving out 10 bags to one family.
Right.
Because that might mean that other families might not get as much. But we do have that donation of 10,000 wellness bags, which is quite
I know that's very important right now. We have a lot of people who's making makeshift masks right now, and they don't have access to masks. And from the study shows that they're very ineffective as far as spreading the COVID virus. And if you find other avenues, or we can work together to find other avenues to get more masks and gloves for our students, kids, families, I'm here with you also. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tier 2.
Any more questions? Okay.
I have a question. I have a question. This is Sharon Cotman. I'm sorry, for your senior support, are you also including, or is it required at this point, in regards to the qualification for the sports requirements, the NCAA and things like that? I think that's the proper acronym. Are you providing support that, there would normally in the past, there have been timelines that basketball players have to get their paperwork in by a certain time to these clearinghouses or whatever. Is that also included in your senior support?
I will have to follow up with that and get back to you and let you know that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So for Tier 2, even when we're providing all of the Tier 1 supports, we know that there is still, about 15% of our students that may need some additional support. And so this is really where the real work begins. We know that when this COVID crisis hit, we had some students that were serving either short-term or long-term suspensions, and we also have a significant number of students, about 300 plus, that receive medical home instruction, some in hospital, some at home. And so you heard me share earlier that we've worked real closely with our principals to try as much as we can, any that we are aware of, to make sure that they're receiving the same level of support as non-suspended students. That's really important because we know, again, that these are our most needy students. So we're doing a little extra there. And the expectation is that, you know, even when they are receiving the instructional support and they've gotten their laptops, we're continuing to reach out to this group of students to make sure that they stay on track. We have a significant number of students that was also connected to mental health counseling in our schools. All of our schools had mental health clinics through Say Yes. And so we meet every other week to make sure that there is continuous counseling that's being provided to these students. Some are reporting that there are some that they're having difficulty reaching. And so at our next meeting, I'll be meeting individually with our providers because I want to begin to peel layers and to talk about specific names, schools, who is it, and then get back with our principals and our ASLs and see how, for those students that the agencies have not been able to connect to, you know, how we're going to drill down and make sure that those supports happen. But the agencies are sharing some very innovative things that they're doing. They've even offered transportation, paying for Ubers, if in fact there is a real need for some brick and mortar counseling where, you know, maybe the teletherapy piece is not working or a student's needs are pretty high. They're willing to pay for an Uber for a family to come in, and they will exercise the social distancing in that piece. But they are really interested in making sure that that counseling is continuing. Our wellness team have been meeting, and there is one school that has piloted a wellness survey. And the principal was very supportive of it. They worked with all of the delegates in the building. And so we're going to take a look at what that wellness survey reveals and see if it's a best practice that can be rolled out to some of the other schools. And my PowerPoint just disappeared.
Cool.
Can you see it?
No.
No, it disappeared.
No, it definitely disappeared.
I think Mike is trying to tell us something.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a nice vision of a photo. I think the last piece.
Okay.
There you go.
We still have students, unfortunately, that, you know, have been placed in foster care during this COVID crisis. It's something that, you know, we did not expect. And so we've had some situations where the Central Registration Office has had to do some enrolling. We've got students that have relocated to the Buffalo Public School District because they are now residing in a foster care home that's in Buffalo. We have some students that have moved to the to the city of Buffalo. And so we are registering students still during this COVID pandemic. We have McKinney-Vento students. We have more than 1,100 students that currently are McKinney-Vento students. And that department has been making sure that those students also, because again, these are our most needy students, have what they need. And so there was one shelter, Viva La Casa, that contacted us and said that they did not have laptops. And Myra's team moved real swiftly to make sure that laptops were delivered to the Viva La Casa site where we have homeless students, many of whom are refugee students and maybe new to the country. We also want to make sure students get that FAFSA support that we talked about. They get information on college applications, their student record reviews are happening. Everything that their non-homeless peers are getting, the expectation is that they're getting that and more. One of the things that has been a little bit of a challenge for us has been the virtual physical examinations for our students to get working papers. Again, wellness, when we think about wellness, being financially well is important. And so the mayor has a summer youth program, And securing the working papers and working with the mayor's office falls under my division. And so we had, I believe, more than 1,800 students that qualified for Mayor's Summer Youth Jobs. We want our young people to have that experience of working, have that opportunity. Getting physicals to get the working papers is a bit of a challenge, because when we look at getting physicals and what that entails, it's, you know, looking at the heart and lungs and doing, you know, kind of a health and wellness assessment. You know, has there been any history of certain things? And so we would be having to take the word of students or parents. And so that's a little bit of a challenge, but we're working with Supplemental, our partners, to see how that can be done. And the mayor's office has extended getting those physicals in until the end of June. So we believe that our young people that need that support will have that. So those are some of the tier 2 interventions that we are providing. Any questions?
I think it would be good if we go to tier 3 and then we can just wrap up with any final questions.
Okay.
Thank you very much. It's very comprehensive.
Okay. So for tier 3, this is really about 5% of our students, and really in a real organic way, we've developed a pretty aligned system of support for those students, families, and staff that really are in need. And so at the left tier of the arrow, it usually starts with school-based support. There's something that comes to the attention of a teacher, counselor, principal within the school building that there's been some trauma, some crises. They may not have been able to contact the student. There may be some involvement of CPS, or a staff person has reported to one of our sites of work that has a temperature of 100 or more. In those cases where it can be handled within the school, the principals are pretty proficient in doing that and handling, you know, many of these situations. And so it's documented there and within the ASL realm, and it's stopped. If it can't be, if there's more intervention or support that needs to happen, then that's when at the district level, folks get involved. And so the principal will contact their ASL. They may need to contact 911 if they've heard about a child that's in imminent harm and they need to contact 911, then they would do that. It would be documented, and then we would follow up. But safety is always the first concern. If a staff member does report that has a temperature of 100 degrees or more, the principal has been empowered to have that person to go and to seek medical attention and to provide a doctor's note before returning to work, to keep them safe and to keep everyone else safe. So again, if things need to continually progress, if a child or staff member continues to need support, then that's when we get into cross-departmental systems. And when I say cross-departmental systems, I know that Dr. Cash's expectation is that we are all working on all of this together every day, and we really do. And so it's not unusual for me to get a telephone call or a text message, whatever time of the night it is, from one of the associates of school leadership that there is a situation that requires immediate attention. And then I go into a full-blown, you know, investigatory mode, and I may need to reach out to multilingual if we're trying to contact a family. Nadia has been very helpful with that. I may need to reach out to Fred Wagstaff. I may need to reach out to Kim Holscher. If it's a student that, you know, is getting into some, you know, some issues and needs mentoring, I may need to reach out to Dr. Morrell. Our crisis team realizes that it's not an 8 to 4 job. It is 24/7, especially in times like this. And so just last week, we were, you know, working until 10 o'clock at night to get some support that was needed. And so we get very individualized when we get to this level. And it takes some peeling of layers to get to the root of, you know, what's really going on. And when we get to that level, in addition to the cross-departmental systems, oftentimes there's a need to reach out to the community. And we have more than 100 partners that we're working with in our schools. And it's not unusual for us to, call on those resources when we need them. We're working with parents. If parents become aware of issues, that's part of the bargain, that they share with us what those issues are so that we can work to support. And there's really this A to Z methodology with this. So we don't just make a referral and drop it and leave it. We follow through, and we make sure that when we make the referral, that the family follows up or that the agency follows up. We've had agencies that have had to make home visits, wellness visits. And we then make sure that even after that, if a child, needs to go into care, or if not, we make sure we follow through to make sure that that child is connected, every single one. So those are some of the things that Student Support Services has been deeply involved in. It's challenging work, but we love the work because we know we are saving lives.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Great
Thank
work.
you, Tanya. That was terrific.
Great work.
Thank you. Also, thank you for your dedication, you and your staff. And I just want to say thank you to everybody here as well for being so dedicated to working with students, especially in such a difficult time. I know I appreciate it. I know my colleagues appreciate it.
Yes,
thank
we
you so
do.
much. Really can't say thank you enough.
Thank you.
So I wanted to see if we have any last questions before we wrap up this work session. Mr. Scott? Sorry, I wasn't sure if that was an old or a new raised hand.
More of a comment and to second what you just said, Dr. Rivera. I think all the staff have been incredibly responsive to the concerns that I've brought to them from parents, from teachers, from other staff, and being able to provide childcare, being able to provide meals to a daycare, connecting students to the internet, providing devices. I think the responsiveness has been really impressive. And just Dr. Williams, I think your work, your team has really made it clear that there's a priority on social emotional wellness especially during this time. I watched the trauma-informed webinar. I tuned into the Parent Center virtual meeting last week. Both were phenomenal. And student placement, you've been extremely responsive. Your team has been responsive to the needs of student placement. I think the work has been exceptional during this time. The biweekly updates that we spoke earlier today about, they have been a game changer in being able to communicate to our parents and keep them informed and decrease their anxiety and that uncertainty regarding their child's placement. And I've received compliments from parents about that practice and being able to have those updates. So that's certainly, I think, a practice that needs to continue beyond just this period of closure and remote learning. So thank you to everyone that's doing everything to meet the needs of our students and our families.
Thank you very much. Okay, so before I wrap up this work session, I just did want to mention to the fellow board members to look forward to an email from Ms. McCosey based on some of the conversations we've been having regarding charter schools and some possible subcommittees for other buckets of work. She'll be reaching out, and then we'll be moving forward next week at the Executive Affairs work session. Unless there's anything else, I'd like to move to close this work session and move on to our budget one. Nothing else? Okay, I declare this work session closed. Again, thank you very, very much to everybody. Your work to support our district has proven the extent to which that the schools are the very centers of our community.
Here. Thank you, everybody, for all your hard work.
Thank you, team.
Thank you, everyone. Administrative staff is phenomenal.
So I'd like
Woods,
to.
Do you want to take a break or do you want to keep going? Ms. Woods?
Whatever the body says. I think we would probably want to get out of here. Does everybody want to move forward to the Finance and Ops Committee, or do you want a 5-minute break?
I like to keep moving.
Move forward, please.
Yeah, let's keep moving.
I'm fine with that.
Wonderful. Okay,
Jeff,
then.
Jeff, are you there? Jeff. I want to make
Yeah, Doc, I'm just trying to get on the screen. I'm on the phone right now.
But Jeff is on the line.
Yeah, so I'll be in probably less than a minute.
Okay, either way. Colleagues, if Mike could put the screen up for this committee, we have a set of 10 slides, and I want to introduce them, and we'll get started. So colleagues, good afternoon, good evening. Needless to say, we're doing everything we can. We have to be cheerleaders during this time as well. We've had National Nurses Week this week. We have National Teacher Appreciation Week. We have Principal Appreciation. Frankly, everybody should be appreciated. Food service workers, security workers, Buffalo PD, hospital workers. Every night we clap at 7 o'clock for our hospital workers, front line, who are saving lives in a very real medical way. But I don't think it's understated to say that many of our food service workers, our custodial staff, our security team led by Fred Wagstaff, who seems to be everywhere all the time, our teachers have been fabulous. Our team, our executive team, our principals, everyone, they also in many ways are frontline workers during this time. And our students need us. We need the support of the community continuing. And we are at a really tough juncture right now. We're at a tipping point, colleagues. I've never seen anything quite like this in my 42 years in leadership positions in public education. Never have seen it. Hope we don't have to see it again. But what we're facing now is some very real threats to the Buffalo Public Schools, very real threats. And we don't want to be distracted by working on this over here and neglecting some of the threats that are right before us right now, right today. And one of those is the fiscal picture, the budget picture for next year and beyond, As I've said before, we look at this as one continuous year, but we also have to plan and be smart enough to anticipate that, yes, we will get on the other side of this in some fashion or another, but will we have the resources to continue? Will we have the resources that our children absolutely will need for them to continue their academic education, but also the whole child focus that we know is so important to one of the most impoverished school districts in the nation. We rank in the top 10 in that category. So the budget picture is dire, colleagues. I can't paint a rosy picture about the budget. It's just not there. Not at this time, and probably not in the future. And hope is not a plan. You're going to have to be very aggressive in lobbying at the federal level at this time for the funds that our states need. Municipalities will need funds. Hospitals will need funds. School systems and school districts will need a much larger influx of dollars, billions of dollars across the country if we're to survive. So tonight we'll be concise, but we want to start getting your headsets around where we are And where we are is in the first phase of what I call the knowable fiscal picture. This is what's known. And so we have budgeted to what's known at this time. But this is only phase one, and there'll be other phases in the near future. So I think Jeff has been concise. He's always concise. He's very clear in the way he presents. We work very closely together to make sure it is understandable for the lay public, as well as for you as a board, so you can do your fiduciary responsibility. And that's what we're going to present to you tonight. 10 slides that show you that we have balanced this $90 million deficit that we were in when the legislative session in New York State let out nearly 2 months ago. But that is only where we are at this phase. And so I will caution you that this has got to be fluid, and we've got to be very, very, very smart to do what we have to do to be able to help the children when we get on the other side of this. So Jeff, start with the picture and where we are, and let's go through these slides so we can make a few main points about each one. I would recommend, colleagues, that you wait until we go through all of these slides, and then let's ask your questions at the end. Jeffrey.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Cash, and good evening, board members. I guess if Mike, can you please just push us forward to the next slide? Okay, so I'll try to get through these as quick as I can. The format of this presentation is in a lot of ways similar to ones that we've seen in the past. So you'll probably recognize some of the charts and things like that, but just want to go over these highlights. So again, this particular budget that we're looking at here is what we call our survivable model. So this is using the current state aid runs that were in the adopted state budget. So in another slide, we'll see the potential for further reductions, but this is basically what we know right now based on published data. So we have budgeted expenditures of $954.7 million. It's an increase. So when you think about that, we're in a tough year, tough budget year, but we are actually increasing year over year compared to the 1920 budget, our budgeted expenditures by 27.3 million or 2.9%. The biggest components of that increase is transportation, which is up 8.8 million or 17.1%. So this is the new transportation contract that the yellow bus contract that we have with First Student. We, for the last 5 years, had been well below market in terms of cost, and this brings us back closer to the market, or what the market was when we bid it out. I mean, things may change, but this is essentially assuming the current transportation system for next year, up 8.8 million or 17.1%. Salaries and benefits up 11.9 million or 2.3%. So that is essentially our current staffing that we have right now, with steps or any salaries, any contracts that still have that have incremental increases based contractually. Those are in there. The associated benefits. It does include, and we'll see in a little bit, this does include the assumed reduction probably of about 45 positions. We'll get to that in a little bit. And charter school tuition is up 4.3 million or 3.2%. Now, a couple months ago, charter school tuition projections were up by about 14 million. This is much less. It's still an increase, and it's an increase because we're projecting more charter school pupils. But the tuition rate has been reduced based on the final state budget that was adopted. It actually changed the formula for charter school tuition, how it's calculated, which actually is a slight decrease on a per pupil basis. So that was certainly welcome, and one of the things that we lobbied hard for, because we can't continue to have both the tuition rate substantially increasing every year, along with the number of students. So that's really where, our costs are going. Budgeted revenues, this is where it's quite a bit different from prior years. Same thing, 954.7 million, because we have to have a balanced budget. But state aid is down 46.4 million, or 5.9%. And federal disaster aid is new. This is a new amount, and this is put right in on the state aid run. So the amount that the state calculated as owing to the district related to disaster aid, they used to essentially offset one-for-one a cut in state aid. So that state aid reduction includes 29.6 million reduction for the coronavirus crisis, and then they're intending us to use federal aid to backfill that.
But Jeff, make the point that we haven't received that and don't know if we're going to receive that.
So, correct. We've not received. We have not received anything yet on this. The 29.6 million is based on the stimulus 3 package that was adopted in April. We don't know for certain what the exact amount is. This is what the state has calculated, and ultimately there's still an application process and so forth that would have to be undertaken for that. $30 million in unspent funds, that's our projection right now for the 19-20 budget. So we intend to, as it was superintendent mentioned earlier, we're really essentially saying what we saved this year, we're going to carry forward into the next year, and that's $30 million is what we anticipate the surplus to be in the 19-20 budget. The most of that surplus is related to transportation. Since we've not been transporting students since early March, and if you project that out for the rest of the year, that's about 15 million. Another 6 million is related to health insurance. We've been told that a lot of medical procedures that folks will be doing are delayed because people are essentially quarantined or they're stuck at home, and hospitals aren't performing procedures, appointments are being canceled, things like that. We are self-insured, so we actually pay actual claims. So about 6 million in there. We also have some, salary reductions. Overtime is lower, extra activities, some things like that. So we're planning on carrying over 30 million. 20 million, so this is another component of our fund balance. 20 million is related to using existing fund balance that we have right now. So we have a 223 million fund balance at the end of June 2019. This would be using 20 million of that, bringing it down close to 200 million. I also have in our revenues the recognition of the $6 million of recovery of the prior year overpayments from charter schools. So we have been, the last 2 payments, we've been collecting those funds. We're all aware now of where Tapestry and Elmwood Village had both tried to get a court to block the district from taking those funds. And the courts would not intervene. They are still going to be doing an intercept request with the education department. But we need these funds. It's pretty clear based on the budget. And 2, we believe the district is obviously entitled to them as it was an overpayment. So that is a component of our revenues right there. If we can go to the next slide, please. So here, just because we need to make sure we frame our budget situation around what is happening right now. We don't know ultimately, and this is pretty much nationwide because I'm in constant contact with my colleagues around the nation. No one really knows what each state is going to do. So different states are approaching things differently. But in New York State, the governor has 3 time periods where he's able to reduce state aid to school districts and other municipalities. The governor has already announced a potential 20% state aid reduction after this April period that just ended. So we've got April. In 2 more months, at the end of June, he's got another period where if revenues or expenditures are out of line, can make further reductions, and then at the end of December 2020. But in this case, 20% state aid reduction, and I just multiplied this by our foundation aid. So foundation aid, 20% of foundation aid is $110 million. That is possibly what the worst case scenario, maybe it could even be worse than that, but this is a significant amount of funding that if this was lopped out of the district right now, would totally change everything. That's not in our budget right now, but based on what happens over the coming weeks and months, that is a distinct possibility. We're also waiting on an announcement of additional federal disaster relief. So a lot of, I think, what the governor is speaking about is trying to make a case for the need for federal disaster relief. So we don't know what those amounts are or could be, and they're not in this model either. But depending on what the state aid reductions are, what the federal disaster relief is, there could be significant reductions forthcoming in our budget. And these are things that aren't going to be just 1 year. It's likely going to last. The last time the state had to do reductions, these overall reductions in the budget, it took about 5 or 6 years to phase those out. So we may be dealing with this for quite some time. So that's
colleagues, just so you can, Jeff, hold on. Just so you can understand the devastating nature of this, we're calling this the second model that we're presenting. It's the devastating model. $110 million cut for us translates into about 1,100 people. 1,100, and you got to understand that would definitely devastate us at a time when our children actually need more. So I wanted to make that clear. Jeff, next slide.
Okay, thank you. Mike, yep, there it is. So the next slide, now we're going back to our survivable model. So this is where we are now, and want to do a little recap here. This was also part of the 4-year financial plan, which we had sent out earlier. So in early April, after the state budget was adopted, we had an $89.6 million deficit that we were dealing with. We already talked about 30 million rolling over 2019-20 funds into the next year budget. 20 million utilize existing fund balance, 6 million recovery of charter school overpayments. We've got a $2 million item in there for the tuition calculation. So in order to come up with the 89.6 million, I had already taken the change in the tuition rate. But as we've gotten towards the end of the school year and had another one of our charter school invoices, I felt comfortable reducing based on attrition that next year I could probably, based on, I think it was about 150 pupils that I could reduce from the model to save about $2 million. The budget department went through, kind of did a thorough review of the budget, looking for errors, duplicates. One of the big things the district did this year, for all the transparency reporting and data that we have to do now, we had to create, essentially, we went from 2,000 account lines to close to 20,000. And that takes into account every type of expenditure that could be at every single school, where at one point these were all accounted for in a holding account. Now we can account for these expenditures at the school level. So that created instances where we had things possibly budgeted in 2 different accounts, the old account and the new account. And when we did our analyses, we found those, some obvious things. So now the next 2 items on this list, as part of the existing budget, there is, there's often new requests that come about. Some of these new requests are in schools, and these are requests that may have been added to the school-based budget last year. And when we run the school-based model based on the current student counts, the proportion of different student makeup of each school, based on the information we had, some positions would be removed. Now, these are typically ones that we look at through the superintendent's holdback. And so right now, those are not in our school-based budgets. Those are still things that we're looking at, but they've been removed from the actual budget in Munis that we use to do this balancing. So the superintendent has an amount that he can allocate back in. We're still looking at those now. So that's 10.2 million. 12.5 million are certain areas that the superintendent is having us look at. And these encompass things like, coaches, aides, assistants, some of the programming in schools, how the schools are structured and designed, and has given the cabinet the direction to find through our work with everything else that we're doing, to try to find in certain areas, certain items that we're able to reduce. We believe, based on what the direction is, that probably would encompass about 45 staff. That would encompass reductions in a lot of currently done extra activity, overtime, things like that. It's better to reduce things like that than it would be regular staff, and also some contracts and other non-staff spending. So that's sort of the amount right now that we are working on to try and come up with the exact detail plans for how this gets incorporated into the budget to maintain that level of balance. I also have in there all of the miscellaneous reductions. This is some rounding things. Transportation fuel costs are lower. Gone through looking at travel and other discretionary things, and we'll make reductions there that don't really impact anything. So that is essentially a rundown of how we got from early April, from that close to $90 million deficit, to where we are right now. And then, Superintendent, I don't know if you wanted to add anything on that slide.
No, colleagues, these are difficult decisions. We've got to start making them right now. The next slides are graphs that can also illustrate kind of where we are and how we've gotten here. The first two are just the expenditures and revenue and how it ties out, how it balances out. Then the following 5 graphs, I believe it is, Jeff, maybe 4, those are illustrative as well. So take these 2 and then the last several slides, and I may annotate 1 or 2 of those.
Okay, yeah. So this slide here, this just provides a little more detail on the revenues. It's not at a high level, but it shows you total state aid, all the non-state aid, and then the fund balance amounts that we have the carryover. So I highlighted in pink these newer things. So that state pandemic adjustment of 29.6 million. And again, the budget year we're talking about is the 2021 balanced, and that's highlighted in yellow. So you can see in there foundation aid totally flat with the prior year budget. Actually, it's a little bit under. Pandemic adjustments, so that's a negative amount that we'll have in our budget. And then other state aids down a little bit too. That's due to the transportation aid. We're not spending transportation dollars now, so we will not be reimbursed for all of them next year. I do have in there flat, so the city property tax is flat. Right now, the county sales tax is at a 10% reduction from the projections that we had. It's a little more than 10, it's probably about 12% reduction from the projections that we had back in February. That's another area that possibly that may need to be revised going forward as well when we get more information. Federal disaster relief's in there, and all other revenues. So that's really all I want to go over on that slide. And it compares to the prior year budget and also the 4-year plan numbers that we had. So the 4-year plan in that salmon or orangey color is what we had thought the budget might look like this year, a year ago. So our projection for the next year. So you can see some of the variances where we are at. I do want to point out that historically, our 4-year plan projections for state aid and our actual state aid have been usually within about $1 million. This year, it's short by $65.2 million. That's really the tale that tells everything. That $65.2 million. This same analysis last year would have been within about $1 million. Mike, if you can go to the next. So same type of presentation format. The yellow one in the middle, 954.7 million. That just shows the spending by the major categories. So compensation, the different benefit types that we have. It's probably worth noting the pension contributions for the teachers' retirement system. They increased this year. That's why you see a 7.6% increase in the in the pension contributions. So that was a hit that we had to deal with this year as well. Transportation, of course, is up substantially, as are the charter school tuition. So we really had no control over any of those, and those are all major drivers in costs. Again, if you go to the very bottom of that yellow column and you'll see it in purple, 0.0. That's the deficit after we take into account revenues, the rollover of last year's 30 million, 20 million in fund balance, and then these expenditures. So that balances us out. Mike, if you can go to the next slide. So this takes our expenditures, again, still in summary form, and I've got a pie chart and I've got these bar charts. So these are documents that I prepare every year. I know the writing's probably a little bit small, but basically I have the various funding functions. So where the funding goes is shown on this pie chart. And you'll see that the two biggest pieces, regular student instruction, the blue, and the orange is special education. Right after that, you've got school-based supports and school administration. So about half of the general fund fits directly into those school costs, school staffing costs. After that, you can see transportation. I've got charter school tuition, the green pie chart slice. So that's a big component of our budget, 14%. General and instructional support, that is our central office staff, central office administrators. So that's 3%. You got facilities and central services. So this is your plant department and your IT department. So plant and IT fall into that category. And those costs are everything from the building engineers to leases to utilities, all of the costs of IT, and also central mailing and printing. And then after that, finishing out the pie chart, you've got debt service, which is another big component, and you've got retiree health care. So that's a piece that we have as sort of that legacy cost. The bar charts on here, I've been doing this for several years. We've been comparing to the 14-15 budget. That was sort of a point at which a few years ago we were given as a reference point to compare to. And each one of these categories, these functional breakdowns of our expenditures, I have a bar for each one of them that tells you how much the funding has increased in those areas since 14-15's budget. And I further break it out by having the top of those bars just showing you what the current year, the 1920 to 21 budget is. So you can see if you look at transportation, the transportation increase in this current budget exceeds the total increase from 14-15 through 19-20, increased about 8 million, and here it's increasing about close to 9 million in 1 year. So you can kind of see that comparison for each of these. Debt service is down, retiree health insurance is down, although it's a little bit up this year. Charter school tuition is, of course, up. And I mentioned this as well because I always like to, I don't have the previous chart, but there was a time when in the past, the only thing that was growing on this chart was retiree health insurance and charter school tuition. Over the last several years, we've made a lot of investment in our schools, and that's clear in terms of the number of teachers, aides, assistants, and other administrators in the schools. So we've done a lot of investing in these areas, and this chart really shows it. I think that's just the way to show it. If we can go to the next page. So this one, the pie chart on the left is the same as what you saw on the previous page. The pie chart on the right only looks at the actual staff counts. So if you strip away the non-staffing items, anything that is not related to our personnel, the teachers, administrators, white collar, blue collar, if you just look at the staffing, you can see that in that right chart. So fully 3/4 of it is regular student instruction and special education. And then if you go a little bit further, school-based support, school administration, and then the last portion, you've got transportation, general and instructional support, and facilities. So that just kind of shows you a little bit more of same functions, but now we're just looking at the number of staff, not looking at the total dollar spent. Next slide, please. Okay, this is a new chart that I hadn't shown before, but I think it's important to see now. And what I did here is I've got the lines are our general fund staffing, the food service staffing, and the grants staffing, and they're stacked on top of each other. So you can see if you want to know the total number of FTEs, you'd take that gray one, the grants, because the grants includes food service and general fund. So you can, but basically what I want to show here is that where I have these recessions marked in 08, 09, and 9, 10, after that, because of the state aid reductions and other disruptions we had, it was roughly 650 staff from our budget that were reduced during that period of time. Subsequent to that, we've been growing them back, but now we haven't, I think, technically entered a recession yet, because I think it requires 2 quarters of reduced economic activity, however the government measures it, but it's going to happen. So in what is likely is that we're likely to be in a similar situation where we're going to have to reduce our spending significantly to account for and accommodate the reduced revenues that we have for a period of time. So that chart, I'm fearful, but it appears likely that we're going to probably repeat something like that chart. And how we do it obviously is still to be determined, but it's quite likely that we'll have some substantial reductions that are because of that, unless the economy turns around very quickly. But it seems with the disruption and the fact that the state has been running deficits anyways, we're not likely to see the level of state support that we have in the past. I think they're going to need some time to rebuild reserves and things like that. Next slide, please. So this chart is kind of similar. I'm plotting out but what I'm doing here, the line chart, the red or orange, it plots out the general fund staffing, and the blue shows the total beds count. So our beds, kindergarten, or it's K-12, and I have the axes are on opposite sides, but what we're trying to show here is that over time, and the superintendent went over this, I think, earlier last month, that we've grown staff, and for good reason, and many of it's compliance related, it's new education, bargain, investment, in things where we were probably under, and we needed it because the student needs are that high. But on the other side of the coin is that we've got a declining student population in district schools, largely due to the charter school issue. The city of Buffalo has the same number of public students since 07, 08, but the makeup of those students now is shifting more and more towards charter schools. And while the, and oftentimes it seems like they probably cherry pick, and we have it's more difficult for the students that remain because there's fewer dollars and so forth for them. But that's the type of chart that for long term can't sustain itself, because the students drive the revenue and the staff drives the cost. Next to that, I just have a comparison showing in the general fund the growth that we've had in our various bargaining units. I didn't break it out any further than that, but you can see that we have grown roughly 720 staff across all these areas, and I'm showing the dollar cost of that staff. So a teacher with the salaries and benefits is roughly $100,000 on average, and 440 teachers works out to about 43 million in staff costs. So that's the cost in our budget to the growth over that period of time, and that's just the 1 year cost. So all these together adds up to close to $59 million. Next slide, please. So this last chart, you've seen it before, but it looks a little bit different now. This shows it's a plot of our actual and budgeted for the future revenues and expenditures. So revenues are in green, expenditures are in red. You want to have, to the extent that the green is above the red, you are in a surplus position. When green is below the red, you are in a deficit position. I also have on here something new. There's a line that's in blue. That line in blue is what our revenue projections were prior to April. So we were at a position where our expenditure and revenues were within striking distance of being structurally balanced, if you will. But you can see that as you get towards the right side of that chart, that blue line, which is our old revenue projections, and the green line, which is our new ones, have very much separated. And I have in there that black double two-sided arrow. That's our gap. So we've got these gaps in our 4-year plan. So we covered the 2021 budget based on the information we have with 50 million in fund balance. Expecting to do that every year for many years into the future it's not sustainable. Fund balance is cash in the bank, if you will, and when that's gone, it's gone. The only way to replenish it is to run a surplus. So we've strategically used it this current year as we try to transition and as we try to to figure out where and how this year is going to work out. But longer term, we're not going to be able to do that. We're going to have to either find new revenues, and certainly the idea of and the likelihood of some federal aid, it probably exists. Additional cost reductions may be necessary as well. It's because we're so funded by the state, we're really it's the will of the state is what drives us. We don't have the ability to generate our own revenues like suburban districts do with taxes. So we have that to grapple with. So this is something when you take it out a couple of years, we're going to have to deal with this. And if the state decides to make further reductions in state aid, that green line that I have is probably going to drop as well. And typically, again, when they make reductions, those reductions tend to stick around for a little bit. It takes time for them to pay those back if they do some sort of a reduction in our budget. So this shows the need for more than ever to follow our 4-year plan and to make sure every decision we make and that we do going forward is always cognizant of that, and that we could find ourselves in a very difficult position in a very short period of time if we're running deficits like that. So that's really all of the primary slides with data on them.
Thank you, Jeff. That was very helpful. Paulette, I'm turning it back over to you.
Okay. She just basically painted a very grim picture. Jeff, I think your projections on the sales tax, as you put it in there, is going to be worse than you're expecting. Erie County just announced 13% cuts, across the board cuts, to try to rebalance their budget because sales tax is just not there. So it's just not looking good. I just have a question about the unbudgeted requests that you're talking about, not including. When you gave us the projections for this year's budget in the you stated this report April 27th, you had included 2.3, almost 2.4 million in unbudgeted requests for teachers. Can you explain, is that what was that, and then what's in the 10 million unbudgeted? Are you saying it's a 2.3, 2.4 million that you've taken out from this year's budget? Is that savings, unfilled positions? You say it's unbudgeted requests. Can you explain more about that?
Yes. So the 10.2 million that was on that I think the third slide that we went over, that included a few different things. So it included departmental requests. So these would be city hall departments, essentially non-school requests, primarily for non-staffing items. Within the schools, and I think, I don't know if it's 2.3 or 2.5, but basically we had 2.5 requests for teachers and support staff, and I don't have the support staff broken out on there, and then another 1.4 for assistant principals. The other piece that we have right now is that many of the reduced class size teachers that were in the Title I grant, Title I is at this point saying they cannot support those anymore. So we've included a portion of these in the budget, that in the balanced budget, and also the superintendent has an equity holdback as well for a portion of these, not the whole amount, not this whole 10.2. But decisions have to be made on exactly where best to allocate those, and some of that's still to be determined.
You're saying the equity piece, that the board was trying to make sure that every school is getting a baseline budget items, the things that they need, that's not in here, and you're saying that that's the $10.2 million, and you have it budgeted somewhere else as a contingency or something?
I think, yeah, you capture.
It's not $10.2 million. It's just the requests that came in for this year, about 38 staff, and cutting across about 5, if I recall, non-support, like 3 PECTA, 2 aides, 19 teachers, and 11 assistant principals. And so some of those are in and some of those are out of assistant principals. And then all of the new requests at this time are out. And I have a several $1 million holdback that once all of this shakes out and we know what our picture is going to look like going back into the school year, I will make an effort to equalize all of the schools in terms of basic needs and services. basic needs and services. That's the goal out of this budget. But if it gets worse than that, then all of that out the window.
I guess I'm looking at your chart, Jeff, and it's saying that the overall budget is still increasing. We're not going back, we're going higher. So.
Talking about expenditures?
The overall budget.
Expenditures, right?
Yes, expenditures.
Yeah, expenditures increase every year. The cost of doing business, you know, electricity, salaries, transportation costs, anything you can think about usually increases. What you got to do is find more revenue to offset the increases. And that's going to be a huge challenge. But so far, we've done it in a general way, and we believe we can do it, make it more specific when it comes time to approving the budget, but only on this 89.6 gap. And that's what we call the survivable model. We can live to fight another day if that's all that ever happens to us. But if more than that happens, it's just gonna be a really tough challenge. And that's why I recommended an ad hoc committee be formed just for budget, and that we begin to meet and talk and look at things 5 different ways to Sunday, you know?
Well, I think that's what the board members are concerned about, that even if we have to do cutbacks, they want them done in an equitable manner, and they wanted to review what cuts and reductions are going to affect their schools. Am I correct, board members?
Yes,
well, that's all of my concern. So I would recommend you get an ad hoc or some kind of committee beyond the committee of the whole to look at this as we go forward. And then we bring it to work sessions, and we bring it to special call meetings, and all of that. So equity is at the top of my mind as well. But you're not going to be able to answer that question immediately. It's going to be rolling out, as Jeff said, well into next December. All we can do is take a wide, you know, an intelligent, professional approach to this at this time. We've given you our best effort at this time, but we should continue to talk about this and you know, communicate about where you'd like to see things be for just this survivable model. And then we'll come back to you just like this if we go to devastating or beyond. And I'm hoping we're not. If we sit, you know, we're all been working hard to try to get additional funds in here. I'm working to try to get additional grant funds and extramural support to try to offset the O&M budget. We have to be very aggressive and active during this period. But I have no simple answers. I have no easy answers, that's for sure. Paulette, you have several board members that have questions.
Okay, you can't see on here. Hold on. I can't see the hands up.
Terrence's hand is up.
Sharon and Jennifer.
Okay. Sharon and then Jennifer.
Thank you. So, Dr. Cash, have you had any conversation at this point about hiring freeze hiring any individuals, or any other just basic stopgap in order to just try to slow anything down? Has that conversation been had yet with amongst yourselves?
Absolutely.
Okay.
All the administrative openings I've frozen for the time being. And in terms of hiring for the new year for staff, I've also held that for at least another couple of weeks. I want to hire new staff that are high potential and high quality, but with some kind of condition that and I think Jamie can answer where we don't, you get a letter of hire, but it's conditional upon budget. I think a lot of districts are doing that because I don't want to lose count during this time. But yes,
Okay.
for administrative positions, I have.
Okay. So is the Federal Disaster Act the same as the CARE Act, or is that something different?
It's one, CARES is one of the federal stimulus bills. I think there's 3 and there's a 4th one that's being considered.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we've done 4, looking at 5, but nonetheless, close enough.
So is that what you have under Federal Disaster Act?
Yes, that, so
is that included in there?
The CARES Act.
Yes, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, that is the CARES Act. It was the 3rd stimulus package released about a month ago. So that's what we have in there right now. So that is, to the extent we know, known. The amount that's in there is what the state has estimated our share will be. And they actually put it right on the state aid run when they released their budget. I suspect that number may change a little bit, but it does not include anything that may be forthcoming. And that is one area that, like, I know the Council of Great City Schools, and as are we, pressing for a stimulus package that focuses much more heavy on education, similar to what was done after the last recession.
Okay, so you said that Title I cannot support these positions. And why is that? Is that because you're saying that the reduction in the aid is going to be too less, or is there something that you know already about Title I?
No, I believe so. This is an area we're still looking at, and I do believe that to the extent that if Title I doesn't cover all of them, that it can probably cover other items. So we're still looking at these grants right now. Title I, is almost in a little ways it's our biggest grant, and it's very similar to the general fund, where they're doing an analysis right now on what is the carryover going to be for next year. If that carryover, because maybe we're not spending all the dollars now, it might be able to support that or others. So I believe, and I'm very hopeful, but I don't have the data right now, that a portion of that will be covered by Title I or potentially other grants. We're trying to analyze that right now. The state recently released guidance on carryovers for grants. So we're going through that right now, because similar to how the general fund is going to run a surplus because we're not spending, a lot of grants are in that same boat.
Okay, thank you. Now, my final question is, have you had the conversation about offering, or my understanding is there's an anticipated rush on retirements that's going to happen this year. Have you guys had any conversations around that and what that may look as far as cost savings, particularly if they are replaced with staff that, for staff that are making less money?
We haven't actually, that's a good question, Ms. Cottman, and we've been wondering about that ourselves. We haven't actually, had the number of retirements come in, at least at this point, that we would like to see, so that we can plan accordingly. But I do anticipate that to come, and I think we may see a large number of them once we get past this point where we're actually going to go back to a school environment.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I can't see the next hand up, so who's next?
Meaning a brick and mortar environment.
Terrence had his hand up for a while. Go ahead, Terrence.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. I would like to, just a couple of questions. One of the questions that we have is, I haven't received, looking at the report, the funds that we received from the city and the county. Second thing is, how will this affect our Title II, III, and IV grants for the city of Buffalo? Is any funding from there that's going to affect our kids that we should be aware of right now and our standing with the state as far as like our music and arts department? And the third question was, how much are we spending right now per dollar per student? And after the projected budget cuts, what will we be looking to spend per student after that?
Yeah, that last question is going to be difficult to answer right now because we don't know what the projected cuts are going to be. We're somewhere in the neighborhood of, I believe, $21,000 per pupil right around now. That's just rough estimate. What was the first question, Jeff? I mean, Terrence, that escaped me about the city and the county. What was the question?
Our funding that's coming from the city and the county through taxes. That wasn't, I didn't see that on the chart. What's our projected cuts that's going to come from?
Yeah,
city
on the revenue, right?
On the revenue chart, the city revenues that we budgeted are the same as last year, so no change, 70.8 million.
Okay.
County sales tax, I have a projected reduction of about 11%, and that is that's from where the current projections were. So it's not quite 11% if you compare it to the prior year budget. However, we have been notified that it might come in worse than that. So that's another area that we may have to revise that revenue reduction downward. If it was another 10% downward, that would be about $5 million more. So if we were to budget a 20% reduction instead of a 10 or 11% reduction, that would be another $5 million that would be reduced from our revenues for sales tax.
Okay. And the third question about our title programs, Title II, Title III, and Title IV. We know that we have been questioned, about our title funding, like our arts and music programs, and we're going to make sure those programs, can stay funded so we can be in accordance with the state with that also. Are those subjected to be levied, or?
What do you mean by being funded on that funding?
We talked about our Title I funding. I was referring to our Title II, III, and IV funding revenue. We're looking at, like you said, 20 million from the state right now and 20 million federal in cuts, which goes to about $90 million that we're looking at right now or more, according to what the state and the county is going to do. How can we look to secure our funding for our arts and music programs also and enhance those?
Well, Title II is professional development. Yes. Title III is multilingual. Title IV, the Title IV program was where there was some art and music were in some of the Title IVs. I don't have that handy right now. I don't know if I have. Let me just see if I have the details on Title IV for next year. That may be something we have to get back to you. Most of the art and music, it's part of just the general fund budget, not specific to a grant.
From our understanding, we pull from both the general grant and the title fund budget for the Title IV. Somehow they get combined.
Right. There's a component of grants that are part of the school-based budgets. So we don't have those today, but if you look at the school-based budgets, you'll see like a pie chart on them, and that's maybe what you're referring to, where you can see the funding source, which includes the various title programs.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I'll wait. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Jennifer, did you have your hand up?
I did, thank you. I just wanted to touch back on what Dr. Kesh had said around concentrating on, us as a board. We're doing a lot of, at least I find myself doing this. I have been talking with the district. We're trying to field so many different concerns and questions and from individuals and our constituents, because that's our job. But I was talking with the district quite a bit on what can the board kind of focus on in the here and now, because we knew this was coming as soon as this pandemic hit. And like, what buckets of work do we need to focus on? So what I was going to propose to you and what Ann was talking about, I just wanted to make sure we cover this again. Under the 3 buckets of work that the district has kind of been, pushing forward. And again, this is for us to discuss if we want to create these subcommittees, but in executive affairs, putting the committees themselves together, but then they go into whatever committees they fall into. One being formed around federal funding, grants, and other supplemental funding opportunities. One definitely, because that chunk, that green charter school chunk, has really got me heated right now. And I really need for folks to realize that when you put that much money out, and we can't even see where it's going or how it's going because it's not our information, we're not privy to know how much that money and where that money is going. And we know exactly where it needs to go in the BPS. So I just want to put that out for the general public. But, charter school strategies and how to neutralize fiscal impact on the district, and going back to some previous student achievement, remote learning in summer school in the age of the coronavirus and beyond, better, faster, smarter, cheaper, whole child focus. So those are the emails I'm going to send out, but I really wanted to touch on them because Dr. Cash put it so eloquently, like, this is the time, this is the work. And if we concentrate all our efforts, maybe 2 or 3 of us in each of these committees, then we'd be able to cover a lot of the concerns that are coming at us. So just look forward to that. That's kind of what Ann was talking about, and it will be the focus of my executive affairs committee next week.
Excellent.
Dr. Cash, you, when you're talking about going back to a school model that is maybe online, not totally brick and mortar, would that give us some opportunities to save funds and various staffing?
It could. It could.
Not on my watch.
We could see efficiencies there, but it's less. It's going to be less about really saving, because what I think we'll see is a growth in this whole area that Tanja so eloquently described. We're going to need more support in that area for our families coming out of this. So it might not be that we save holistically on the whole budget, but we certainly could save in some areas if we get this technology piece put to the very best use that it can be put to. So it's an interesting point, but we won't know until we refine it a little further.
Did you apply for a grant for computers so that we could move forward with making sure every child had laptops? Is there
Yes.
a progress report?
Part of the budget is sitting on that right now. I asked about that today from the Big Five, and we've got our application in, and I've asked Jennifer Powell to try to move that, get that moved. We need those dollars now for our students.
Mary? My hand is up, Paulette, again.
Oh,
is
I'm
there
sorry.
Anyone else whose hand was up before mine? Okay, I have a question, Dr. Cash. Have you talked amongst yourselves about what type of services we can sell, the things that we're doing in this district that we can market? Have you guys had gone down that path yet to create revenue?
That we can sell?
Or that we can market, right.
I haven't thought so much on that line as much as I have on 3 main areas that we always are looking at, and that is cost savings, cost avoidance, and revenue generation. So where we can get further revenue, yes, we are looking at that all the time. I have a team that looks at that on a regular basis. It's in Jeff's department.
Okay, have they come up with any ideas
Yeah.
as far as the revenue
As
piece?
part of our 4-year plan, we were yielding on about 18 out of 21, was it, Jeff, or 24 areas that we had in our 4-year plan to cost save, cost avoid, and generate revenue. We were making some excellent headway there. Jeff, your team can put together some of those items, but the answer is absolutely.
Yeah, and actually there is page 25 of 68 in our 4-year plan. We outlined a lot of the revenue generating that we've done. In large part, it's state aid and federal aid, not so much any other sources, but at least it gives you an idea of the things that we're thinking of.
Well, at one point, Jeff, we had said we're going to change out all the light bulbs in the district. I thought we were doing that, and that was going to be a $1 to $2 million saving to go more energy efficient with the lighting all across the district, for example. We had done something with that aid when there was some kind of Medicaid that was dropping in the creases, and you put a staff member on that, and we turned it into a total $3 million revenue. You remember that?
Yes, yep, that's one of the items that we have outlined in the 4-year plan. And yeah, we have started swapping out some of the lighting for LED lights. And the plant department we're really in the final stages right now of an energy performance contract. And what that is, it's basically that we will essentially get funding to building aid to swap out the more expensive lighting, and that'll basically allow us to save dollars on utilities and also get building aid in return. So that's another area we're working on right now.
Thank you.
So I welcome all the ideas around that. That's an important area to be working on at a time like this. So thank you for the question, Ms. Cotman.
Okay, I saw Larry, and then I saw Terrence.
Who's next?
I
Larry.
think Larry is.
I just want to go on record that I thought I heard the suggestion of technology and remote learning replacing staff, and I am entirely opposed to that idea of us using technology to save costs. When our kids return to these buildings, when it's safe, they are going to need more one-on-one contact with an actual human being and not less. And so we should not in any way, in my opinion, be considering replacing staff to save money with technology and remote learning. I'm in complete favor of it, using remote learning and the skills that we've acquired in this crisis to supplement education in a school building, but I would be opposed to it replacing the work and the staff in our buildings that they do with our kids on an individual basis every day.
Well, I think you might have heard that. I don't know how you quite heard that. I don't know, but what I was talking about, because we are going to have to be innovative about this. I don't want to take away any staff. I'm hoping I don't have to reduce staff that provide direct support to students. But if we get really good at some of this work, like if you're doing video conferencing or video lessons, like they do in the business world, where you have TED Talks or you have really succinct but excellent presentations around a concept or some professional development for employees, there may be a time that we need to start looking at how we deliver instruction, is what I'm trying to get, what I'm getting at there. We may not need all of the ways that we deliver instruction to be, 5,000, 6,000 teachers. So we need to take a look at it. I don't have all the answers tonight, but if I could have the very best teachers teaching certain subjects and delivering lessons and videotaping those so that all the students got the advantage of that lesson and that approach to it. And then we got into smaller groups to talk and have students be engaged with answering questions, digging deeply into the material. I don't know. We may have to reduce staff along that line. We'll have to talk about it. I want to keep an open mind about all of that. But certainly, if we have high need students that have social emotional supports, you don't cut into counselors and social workers and special education support and teachers, so forth and so on. And it is going to be getting better and better because innovation is going to come into this space now during this time that we have been paused. And we'll need to keep up or we'll lose out.
Chair?
Sure. The last question that I know that in the past to build revenue, I know that like programs like McKinley High School had a development project where they actually built homes, fabricated homes, and sold it out to the community. I know we had some that's in the Fruit Belt and over on the Sycamore neighborhood, and that was a great revenue source utilizing our students. Also, a reminder that I know that McKinley's having a flower sale also for the agriculture department coming up this week, next week I believe. And then also we had property, Dr. Cash, that we was paying rent on that wasn't utilized. Have we looked into those properties also? Maybe to sublease those properties out if we're under contract, or to release our hold on those properties?
We've talked about it. Some of these properties we don't really own, so I'm not sure we can sell them. We maintain them and we renovate them. What's that?
I'm sorry, the question
Give
was
me an
sublease.
example of what you're thinking about.
I know the Tri-Main building. The Tri-Main building is one of our properties that we have under contract right now. Like properties like that where we're not presently utilizing, can we look to probably sublease those out, or to gather those contracts, or how can we move forward with projects like that?
We're getting ready to bring a project over to the Tri-Main building. You're talking about the one where the Tom Batali program is?
I'm not quite sure where we were on putting the program there. I haven't received a report about it.
Across from 54.
Okay. Well, if you can send that report out, it'll be greatly appreciated, so we can be updated about what's going on with that facility. We're just looking at ways of revenue savings.
Yeah, we may have to close school buildings, colleagues. We may have to close school buildings. If we have them to sell, we'll sell them. I don't know what we have to sell, but I'm open to hearing what you think we could sell. And we'll have to find revenue any way we can heading into this next scenario. So thank you for your comments.
Question. Have we talked about, when we were talking about the situation with the charter schools, have we talked about recouping any of the money from the Edison property? That particular venture cost us upwards of about $10.5 million. I think that's something that the board needs to look into and see about recouping some of that money that was lost in regards to that property. I think that's something that the charter school committee can do at that point. We need to talk about getting some of the money back that's been basically taken from our district at this point. Paulette?
Did we lose Dr. Cash?
Yeah, I couldn't hear you back there for a moment.
Okay, so where you, Paulette, where you are, Paulette? Is there any other hands that are up?
I didn't see any other hands, but Dr. Cash, Ms. Cotton was asking about the Edison project, something about millions of dollars that we need to recoup.
Well, that's something that we would have to deal with the ad hoc committee for the charter schools. That's something that'll have to be addressed.
Mm-hmm. Does anybody else have any other questions? Dr. Cash, I thought we were going to at least have a meeting and have available all the school-based budgets so we could see what you're proposing.
Yeah, we can do that. I don't think they're prepared yet. If they're prepared, we can get them out to you.
Madam Chair, what is the deadline for the submission of the budget, Dr. Cass? Do you have a deadline?
Jeff, has that been adjusted? Are you on the line, Jeff?
I am. So our deadline, we're not one of the suburban districts that vote on their that have a public vote on their budget. So our deadline was essentially to submit to the control board that 4-year plan along with the associated budget. It's not the detailed budget, but the associated budget that goes along with that. We obviously try every year to adopt the budget by May. It can go into June. The issue that we run into is that if we don't have an adopted budget, we don't have a budget that we can then spend on. So there's things that get delayed, but this year is obviously different. That we may still be working on this budget in June, depending on what comes in the next several weeks.
Okay, thank you.
You don't have a deadline to submit to the disability authority?
We submitted to the city, colleagues, and we submitted to the stabilization authority. We submitted this budget right here. What I would recommend is that you ask for any detail you want or would need in order to pass this budget, because this would be our survivable budget. We can give you school-based budget, site-based budgets, and any detail that you would like to review. We can probably give that to you, Jeff, in the next couple of days? And
yeah,
then
it may take a little bit longer to pull everything together. We're pulling together the school-based budgets right now and our detailed budget, but we have to do some internal reviews first before, to make sure there's no.
Let's shoot for the top of next week to get that to the board, and then let's let them review it intensely, for several weeks if need be. Call special call meeting, whatever you need to do to try to get this piece passed. But I got to tell you, it will likely have to change. But we do have we do have a time frame that we at least have to get something approved. It's a tricky year. It's just a tricky year this year.
I just think everybody would like to be able to see what is in the budget. This budget, if you want us to pass it, I think everyone would like to see what is in their schools, if there's reductions, if there's fewer teachers, what's actually in it.
I agree, and we'll be happy to share that with you. Jeff, make that a priority to get that ready.
Yep, top priority.
Okay.
Any other questions? Board members?
Now, colleagues, I don't know if you have kids or not, but they got to be either hungry or annoyed or something at you. So let's try to wrap this up so I can go to the bathroom.
My boys are in bed. I got all night.
Good for you. Good for you.
If there's
All
no
right.
other questions,
Anything else, colleagues?
I got some people waiting for me.
Okay, thank you.
Can we get a motion to adjourn?
No motion needed. You just call the meeting closed, Paulette. Just call the meeting closed.
Wait a minute, no, Jay, did you raise your hand?
You this little boy. Look how he's grown.
Sorry, I had my microphone muted this entire time.
Hey, okay.
Hello, I'm here. I've been here.
Good to see you.
I was just super quiet because my mic was muted.
Good for you. We didn't do it. We didn't do it.
All right, well.
You okay?
Yeah, good to see everybody.
All right, stay healthy, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Goodbye.
Thank
See you later.
The meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.
Hi, everybody.